Up front next, it's election night in America, and in South Carolina, polls just closing. Will a Trump-backed election denier take down a Republican incumbent who stood up to Trump on the election? Plus, he's a member of President Biden's party, but he's not on board with Biden doing business with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. He's my guest tonight. And the worst flooding in parts of Yellowstone National Park in more than 100 years. Families stuck their videotaped this building being completely swept away by floodwaters as they watched. Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, it is election night in America, and front and center tonight are Trump's lies about the 2020 election. As the January 6th committee lays out its case for how Trump tried to overturn the election and knowingly lied to his supporters about it, Trump's conspiracy theories are not just a thing about the historical record, that we need to put in there. They're not a thing of the past. They're actually still metastasizing. Just listen to two of the Trump-backed candidates on the ballot tonight.
In the middle of the night, they transformed our election. And you know what they did to the election in this state. We fought right through until the end. But they took the election.
We, the people, know the election was stolen, and we are not taking it anymore.
So one of those was Adam Laxalt running for Nevada, in Nevada for Senate. The other is Katie Arrington running for a House seat in South Carolina, where polls just closed at the top of the hour. So as we get information for you, we'll bring it to you. Obviously, they're counting right now. Arrington trying to unseat incumbent Nancy Mace, who was critical of Trump and his allies after the deadly insurrection.
His entire legacy was wiped out yesterday. They should be taking 100% responsibility for this. They've enabled this. And I was shocked as anybody that the words turned to action yesterday.
Also hoping to hold onto his seat in South Carolina is Republican Congressman Tom Rice. Now, Rice shocked many in his own party. He was one of those GOP votes to impeach Trump for his role in the January 6th riot, a vote that Rice knew could cost him his seat.
If you lose, is it going to be worth it?
Sure, it'll be worth it. Absolutely.
Your obituary, the first sentence is going to be Tom Rice, who was a Republican member of Congress and voted to impeach Donald Trump.
So be it. I'll wear it like a badge. So be it.
Jeff Zeleny is out front. He is live in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. John King is standing by at the Magic Wall. So let's go first to the ground as the polls close with you, Jeff. The polls literally closed, 2-3 minutes ago. Counting has now commenced. What is the latest you're hearing from voters in the state and from the campaigns?
Well, Erin, the polls were open for 12 hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Republican officials are telling us that they do believe there was a low turnout race, perhaps not surprisingly on a very warm summer a June day, but there is a very passionate following here, and that is what could actually turn this race. Nancy Mace, of course, in her first term as a Republican member of Congress, she flipped this district back in 2020. A Democrat won it last time. That is her entire message. Elect her to be the party nominee, and she will keep this seat in Republican hands. Her opponent, of course, Katie Arrington, is, she's backed by the former president, full-throated. But the voters here we talked to seem like they are perfectly capable, as we've seen in other states before, to still support the former president, still like him, but not follow his lead necessarily in who he's endorsing. So certainly a lot of optimism on the Mace side of the campaign, perhaps a slightly different dynamic just north of us here along the coast from Myrtle Beach down about halfway through the state. Tom Rice, one of 10 Republicans to vote to impeach President Trump. He's the first one to face a primary challenge like this. Republicans do believe this is likely to go into a runoff contest. That would be an election a couple weeks from now. The leading contender, Russell Fry, is a state representative firmly backed by President Trump as well. So even though many Republican voters we talked to say, yes, they are willing to make up their own minds, they can still be sort of agitated. And it's that impeachment vote here that makes a difference in this race. Nancy Mace did not vote to impeach President Trump. She voted to certify the election, and she has rarely criticized President Trump since then. Tom Rice has kept right on. He told me yesterday that Donald Trump is the past of the party. The party should move on. Erin, tonight we'll see if Republicans agree with him, but no doubt this is the latest stop in President Trump's revenge tour. We'll see if Republican voters are listening to him or following their own lead.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thank you very much. And as we start to get results, obviously, we're going to go back to Jeff. I want to go to John King at the Magic Wall now, though, as these polls close in South Carolina. John, what are you seeing?
Aaron, we have no votes just let me just walk through. This is the state of South Carolina. Remember how Republican this state is. Donald Trump won it by a dozen points in 2020, which was a Democratic year. So this is a good year for Republicans. They think whoever wins these primaries in these House districts will easily coast to election. But this is the Tom Rice district. It has Myrtle Beach. A lot of times you talk about a House district, people around the country say, I don't know where that is. These are very familiar areas. Myrtle Beach, the resort area along the coast of South Carolina. Then it stretches up this way into more rural areas. Russell Fry is the Trump-backed candidate. He supports the big lie. What's interesting in this race and all these others, Aaron, first-time Republican voters are going after hearing Bill Barr, Trump's campaign manager, people inside the White House saying, no, the big lie, is a lie, and we told Trump that. So will that affect Republican voters? Russell Fry believes in the big lie. Tom Rice, you just heard. He's proud of his vote. He says he will stand by it if he loses his job and loses his career in politics. So be it. This is the Myrtle Beach area. Then you just move south along the coast. Charleston, a city many Americans know, and then again stretches down along the coast here. A lot of military communities here, a lot of resort communities here. Then it stretches up a little bit into rural areas here. Katie Arrington, she supports the big lie. You played her at the top of the program. Again, despite the fact that everybody around Donald Trump says the big lie is a lie. The big lie is the fraud. And then Nancy Mace, who you played. She worked for Trump back in 2016. Then she was harshly critical of him, and now she has tried to navigate back, essentially saying, I'd rather talk about other things than Trump. She's trying to find this sweet spot in the middle. But as Jeff noted, this is another race, just like in Georgia. She has a lot of the Republican establishment around her. She believes that will help her tonight, including Nikki Haley, who was Trump's ambassador to the United Nations. So we're waiting. I'm going to pull out to make sure we haven't gotten any early votes. Still nothing yet. When they come in South Carolina, though, Aaron, when they do come, they tend to come in pretty quick.
All right. Well, hopefully they do here as we continue this hour, and you'll be able to show us what you get. But speaking of polls closing, they are not closing in Nevada. And in fact, they're open for 3 more hours, I understand, John. So what are you watching for there tonight? It's another important one.
Nevada is a huge state, not just tonight, but then in November. This is a state where Republicans think they can flip the governor's office. They think they can flip a Senate seat, which could mean control of the Senate, flipping to Republicans. They also think they can flip 2, maybe 3 of the House seats. So let's go out to Nevada. This is the House map here. I'm going to turn it over to the Republican primary because this is the race you highlight at the top. Adam Laxalt, that's a famous name in politics in Nevada and in the Republican Party. Used to be considered a more mainstream, straightforward establishment Republican. You played the clip at the top of the show. Has completely bought into the big lie. Joe Biden won Nevada. It was close. Donald Trump ran, let's go back and just take a look. We can show our viewers, 50 to 47. It was a 2.5-point, 3-point race there. It was close, but Joe Biden won in Nevada, without a doubt. Back in 2020. But again, this cancer is spreading in the Republican Party, and we're going to see it here tonight in other races as well, Aaron, even though we now have on the record from the January 6th committee everybody around Donald Trump saying Joe Biden won fair and square. And yet the cancer is in the body, and Republican candidates keep saying no. No to facts, no to the truth, no to math.
Yeah. As I said, as you said, spreading, it's been metastasizing, and we're now seeing it, right? People who want to say, just don't put it in the past, it's clearly not. All right, John, thank you. But as I said, we're going to go back to John. As he said, those results in South Carolina, when they come in, could come in very quickly, and those polls closed about 8 minutes ago. In the meantime, Van Jones with me now, former special advisor to President Obama, and David Urban, who was an advisor to President Trump's 2020 campaign and has since advised candidates running against Trump-backed candidates. So let's be clear here, David. When we look at South Carolina, where we're awaiting those results, Nancy Mace and Tom Rice are both on Trump's hit list. He slams them both constantly. Mace has been trying, though, to say, well, let's talk about other things. You heard John King, right? I'm not going to back down on the fact that I took on Trump, but I don't want to talk about it. Tom Rice, on the other hand, not backing down, not stepping away from his criticism of Trump at all. Whose strategy is better?
I guess we'll find out tomorrow morning, right, Aaron? Listen, Nancy Mace and Tom Rice have 2 completely different districts as well, right? Nancy Mace's district is a lot more purple, and I think that she's trying to run through the raindrops without getting wet, so to speak. And the woman she ran against, has run against her tonight, was the congresswoman who lost that seat to a Democrat, and so she has a different claim to make. Tom Rice, I think, is happy with his fate, whatever it's going to be, and I think he's headed for a runoff. But I suspect that he's looked at his numbers and feels, a little differently about his race than Nancy Mace does about her race tonight.
All right. Well, as you point out, it's not just the message; it's also the audience, and where she is with Charleston. Right, is a lot more purple for sure.
Yeah, in his district, if you looked at John's drawn that on the map there, Rice's district goes way into really deep South Carolina, where there's a lot more conservatives. So,
Van, Nevada. 3 hours away here. Kyung La was out there, and she spoke with a member of one of the powerful unions in Nevada, the Culinary Workers Union, right? Which wield a lot of power, obviously, in that state with Las Vegas. So they're working on getting out the vote, and I wanted to play just part of that conversation for you.
When you talk to people, how are they feeling?
They're mad. They're mad. They're mad at Democrats.
Are you worried about Senator Cortez Masto this year?
Yes. Yes, it's gonna be tough, this election.
Why this feeling right now?
Well, it's an honest reflection of the Democratic Party grassroots this summer. There's just a sense of disappointment and frustration. I think people are going to get back in the fight in the fall when they realize that if you just stay mad and don't participate, you're going to get a worse outcome. But I think people had such high hopes when Trump left that things were going to be great. You're going to get all this stuff done. Democrats got a lot done, but promised to do even more. And so when you come up short and you've got gas prices through the roof, it's hurting the morale of the grassroots. I don't think that will be true in the fall, but it's true this summer.
So, David, Trump still carries weight among Republicans. When we talk about the metastasizing, lie about the election, his former Attorney General Bill Barr, right, who now, is on tape calling Trump's election fraud claims bullshit, crazy, amateurish, total nonsense, and say that he had lost sense with reality. Okay, so he says all those things.
No, I watched it, yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, he still says he's going to vote for Trump if he's the nominee. Are we going to see more of that?
Yeah, I think you will, Aaron. I think that people, it's the state of politics. It's the crazy state of our politics that, that Van's talking about, and you saw reflected by, by that poll that the person out there knocking doors and trying to work for the Democrats. It's the reality that we face, that people are just so frustrated. They're so frustrated in their lives. They're frustrated when they go to the gas pump and they were hoping for something different, but they see runaway inflation and they don't have jobs. Their shelves are empty. And it's impacting their daily lives, and they think, listen, Trump was bad, but like my life was better there. My 401k existed. If you look down and you have brackets on your 401k now, or if you're fortunate to have anything in your 401k, people they look down and they think back. Things were different. They might not be happy with Donald Trump. I don't think a lot of people would say, like, we'll take the rhetoric. I think they like the policies without the rhetoric, and I think that's what they're divided about.
So Van, there are concerns among some Democrats, and we're now seeing them out there, right? So they're now putting their names behind it, and we're hearing it publicly. It had been private, and now it's percolated up about whether Biden should run in 2024. So I want to play an exchange from last night. This is Don Lemon speaking to the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre.
Does the president have the stamina, physically and mentally, do you think, to continue on even after 2024?
Don, you're asking me this question. Oh my gosh, he's the president of the United States. I can't even keep up with it. We just got back from New Mexico. We just got back from California. That is not a question that we should be even asking.
Okay. As David Axelrod says, and he's come out and put his name on it, he said, look, this is a person who, if they win, will be closer to 90 at the end of their second term than 80. And therefore, these are very fair questions. Joe Biden said these were fair questions the last time when he was running. So do you have these questions?
Well, I think everybody is looking very closely now. When Biden does well, he does really well. That gun speech he gave, he was perfect. It was powerful. When he does badly, when he stumbles, you get nervous and you wonder, is it just a stutter? Is he tired, or something else there? And so I think that people are just looking. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of Democrats are like, if this guy's ready to go, we're behind him. But if he's not ready to go, he should let us know. I think that's what's going on.
I mean, look, guys, you saw him on Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel had to bail him out. It was a softball interview. He was wandering through the desert, and Kimmel's like throwing him a lifeline to get a commercial.
Look, I mean, the way I see it is he's uneven. When he does well, he does really, really well. And when he doesn't, he doesn't. And so the question is, which one do you focus on? The right wing loves to focus when he does not as well. But you also got to recognize, he's under more pressure than probably any president's been in for 57 generations, and he's holding up under it and doing reasonably well. So, listen, if anybody says that Democrats aren't beginning to have these questions behind closed doors, that's not true. People are. But if he's ready to go, people in this party are ready to back him up.
Right. I guess the question is this, what happens at the midterms, what decision is made, and how it's put out there. All right. Thank you both very much. I appreciate it. Thanks. Of course, we're awaiting these results from South Carolina. As John King had said, they usually come in quickly when they start to come in. Polls are closed. So we're keeping every eye on that every second. Next, the stock market in bear territory tonight, which is a big part of the reason for the malaise you heard in Kyung's interview there. The Fed is ready to take major action, but that action is going to hurt everybody even more in some ways. Our economic analyst Jim Bianco is on deck. Plus, new video from the January 6th committee showing a Trump campaign lawyer warning another Trump ally that he could be breaking the law. Ukraine's president tonight begging for more weapons. But will even they be enough to stop Putin in time? Tonight, the S&P down for the fifth day in a row, sinking deeper into bear market territory. This as President Biden was touting the economic progress made on his watch, while acknowledging that the inflation crisis is taking a toll on American families.
Under my plan for the economy, we made extraordinary progress. And we put America in a position to tackle a worldwide problem that's worse everywhere but here, inflation. It's sapping the strength of a lot of families.
So this is coming as the Fed meets tomorrow and is expected to take aggressive action on interest rates, likely raising them by 0.75 of a percentage point. Okay, when you've had rates basically hovering around zero for years, that's a lot. And it is, in fact, by any measure, a lot. It is the biggest hike. A 0.75 point in one meeting would be the biggest hike in nearly 3 decades, 30 years. Out front now, Jim Bianco, economic analyst and the president of Bianco Research. So, Jim, how big of a deal would it be at this point for the Fed to do this, to come out and raise interest rates by 0.75 of a percentage point?
It'll be a big deal because they're signaling that they're going to get aggressive on interest rates. Tomorrow's expected rate hike of 0.75% is not alone going to be the difference maker. But if it's the start of more such hikes, and the market does expect at the next meeting in July that they're going to do it again, that the cumulative of all of that should have some very powerful action on the economy.
I mean, that would be, if you think about it, right, within a month, a 1.5% increase just in the base rate. I mean, it's a pretty stunning thing. And in the context, Jim, as I said, of recent years, where interest rates haven't even been things that people have had to think about, right? These numbers are enormous. They're also enormous objectively within the context of 30 years of history. But even these kinds of increases, given what we're seeing on inflation, it might take even more, right, to stop the inflation genie now that it's out of the bottle.
Yeah, it might, but let's remember what the Fed is trying to do. The fancy word they use is tightening financial conditions. You and I might know that as lower the stock market. And if you lower the stock market, hopefully it will get people to pause or at least roll back some of their spending. That will take the demand for goods and services down a little bit and remove inflation. So what they're trying to accomplish is to, make us all look at the stock market a little bit more skeptically, and hopefully that will translate into our everyday purchases in order to bring inflation down. That's not exactly what we want them to do, but that's the only tool that they have right now.
Right. Well, it's a blunt one, but when you get to this point, and again, like this is you had money coming out during the COVID money, right? You had the Fed flooding the economy with money. I mean, this has been many, many years of this getting to this point. But in terms of pointing the blame, Biden today railed against record corporate profits. He demanded that companies pay more in taxes. Now, he's focused specifically on oil companies as gas prices have hit record highs. So when you look at the math here, because, by the way, there is math to be done, right? You look at corporate profits. Are they playing a real role in the inflation crisis, or is this more of a political punching bag?
No, it's more political. They're not playing as big a role. The reason that gas prices are at a new all-time high at $5.02 nationwide is largely because of the supply-demand imbalance. We're demanding more gasoline than we can currently produce, making it up through imports. And if you were to subtract from it whatever the corporate profits are, you might take a couple of pennies off of that number, maybe a nickel or a dime at most. But then does anybody feel better because we're at $4.92 on gas? So it's not really the real major problem. Major problem right now is we can't refine enough crude oil into gasoline for what we're demanding.
And that's obviously that's the bottom line. That's what has to be addressed. All right, Jim Bianco, thank you very much ahead of this crucial Fed decision tomorrow. And next, the January 6th committee releasing new evidence tonight after suddenly postponing tomorrow's hearing. We're going to speak to a member of the committee next. And jailed Putin nemesis, the lead opposition leader Alexei Navalny, on the move, tonight reportedly being housed in a facility that could put his life at risk. Are you out of your effing mind? That's a quote. It's what Trump campaign attorney Eric Hirschman says he asked conservative lawyer John Eastman after the deadly insurrection on January 6th. He did that because Eastman, who tried to pressure Vice President Pence to overturn the election, was allegedly still trying to challenge the results. Here's Hirschman.
He started to ask me about something dealing with Georgia and preserving something potentially for appeal. And I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition. Eventually he said, orderly transition. I said, good, John. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it.
All right, that testimony is significant and powerful, and it was just released by the January 6th Select Committee after it postponed tomorrow's hearing at the last minute. Out front now, Democratic Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, who is a member of the committee. And Congresswoman, I appreciate your time. So let's, I know Thursday the hearing then is going to focus on Team Trump's campaign to pressure Mike Pence to overturn the election. John Eastman, obviously a key player in that effort. Can your committee prove not just that Donald Trump was aware of this pressure campaign, but that he was actually behind it and orchestrating it as well?
Well, I think you have seen in the last two hearings that we do have evidence for the assertions that we make during the hearings. And I will let folks tune in to the third hearing to see the evidence. And often that evidence is presented in the words of Republican advisors to the president. And they are recounting their perspective on this effort to apply pressure to the Vice President, the Department of Justice, or otherwise, or they're providing information about how they provided guidance to the president that he had lost the election, that there was nothing there when it came to the fraud allegations, that the court cases that were being pressed hadn't been ruled in his favor. So we will be laying out that evidence in the third hearing.
So U.S. Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger today said there was no evidence that the Republican Congressman Barry Loudermilk led constituents on a surveillance tour or a reconnaissance tour on January 5th, the day before the insurrection. Now, this comes after your committee had raised questions about Loudermilk's interactions that day, and after some Democrats alleged Republicans did give tours to members of the pro-Trump mob ahead of the insurrection. So, Congressman Murphy, I know you have had a chance to look at these results as part of the U.S. Capitol, findings. Do you accept the findings of the Capitol Police Chief?
The committee is still continuing its investigation into this specific area of interest, and we haven't come up with any of their conclusions yet. I think that there will be some information forthcoming as we do wrap up that part of our investigation. Of course, we will take into consideration what the Capitol Police have said and how they reached their conclusion, but we haven't yet completed our investigation. And I think it's very important that we do that because we have access to a broader range of information than maybe necessarily what the U.S. Capitol Police is looking at.
So which is, important, I hear you loud and clear. You've got more information than they have. So, I think all eyes will be on what you do conclude. Your committee's hearing for tomorrow was postponed this morning, Congresswoman, at the last minute. And committee member Congressman Aguilar said the change gives the public, and I quote him, the time and space to digest the hearing so far. Congresswoman Lofgren, though, blamed technical issues. So what is the real issue, the reason?
You know, it was a combination of scheduling issues. As you saw in the second hearing, one of our witnesses had a life event. His wife went into labor and he was going to have a baby. Yes, that's right. And so we had to make adjustments at the very last minute. And the reality is that we are putting these hearings together very meticulously, and it takes a lot of effort. And the effort is performed by people who are human beings with lives and schedules, and we are working around witnesses' schedules and otherwise. I think an upside benefit of pacing this out a little bit, which Mr. Aguilar pointed to, was to allow folks to absorb it, but I think a lot of it is just simply driven by logistics, which I know is boring and not something media wants to talk about. It's easier to kind of speculate about, you know, what scandal is driving this, but the reality is it's just about working with a lot of hardworking people who also have lives and are dealing with, you know, the things that come up and scheduling and whatnot.
All right, Congresswoman Murphy, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
So good to be with you.
All right. And next, incredible access to Ukrainian troops. You'll see how they're using the weapons supplied by the United States and its allies.
This exercise is designed to accustom Ukrainian forces to the use of Western weapons.
And catastrophic flooding in Yellowstone National Park. I'm going to talk to one family that was trapped inside the park and witnessed this building, this home, being completely swept away. Tonight, the war in Ukraine at a crucial moment, but according to U.S. intelligence officials who are telling CNN that the days ahead could determine the outcome of this war. Russian forces right now are closing in on two crucial cities in the east of Ukraine as President Zelensky begs for more weapons, warning, quote, if Ukraine is not strong enough, they will go further. Ben Wiedemann is out front.
American symbol, American weapon. Ukrainian troops try out new equipment, U.S.-supplied M4 rifles fresh out of the box. Away from the front lines, these soldiers are preparing to join the battle raging in the east.
This exercise is designed to accustom Ukrainian forces to the use of Western weapons. This is an American 50 caliber machine gun firing Italian bullets. There's a problem, though. We're told there's not enough Western ammunition.
And not enough weapons either. Even in this drill, much of the firepower dates back to the Soviet era. Ukrainian forces are slowly losing ground in the battle for the eastern Donbas region. Morale here is high.
Good morning, Vietnam!
Yet no one believes these rifles will halt the Russian advance.
This is not enough.
Ukrainian officials say Russian artillery outnumbers their artillery at a ratio of perhaps more than 10 to 1. Used to deadly effect in the city of Severodonetsk, now almost completely under Russian control. Big guns, not small arms, could help Ukraine turn the tide.
I can protect myself as a soldier with this weapon. I can protect my comrades. But unfortunately, I can clear my country from invaders using only these rifles. So we need more artillery. We need heavy rocket system and other serious weapons because it's the modern war.
From USA.
The U.S. and its allies have delivered advanced weapon systems to Ukraine, and more are on the way. But the army here is losing men at an alarming rate, more than 100 killed in action every day, according to Ukrainian officials. We need a basic minimum to avoid more casualties. Artillery, smart weapons, radar, drones, and people to train us, says the commander, Lieutenant Alexander, a veteran of the French Foreign Legion. We've shown we will fight. We will learn to use these weapons. And that will take time. And time is a luxury this nation at war cannot afford.
And it may be too late for the Ukrainian defenders in the city of Severodonetsk. I was back there in April, and it was clear that the Ukrainians were outgunned back then. And now, it's probably too late. Aaron?
Ben, thank you very much. Reporting live from Ukraine tonight. And next, some results coming in now from this crucial primary in South Carolina. Polls closed at the top of the hour, and we've got some of the results starting to come in. We're going to go to John King at the Magic Wall. And of course, we will be talking about President Biden's upcoming trip to Saudi Arabia. I want to go back now to John King at the Magic Wall. We have more results coming in from South Carolina. So, John, what are you seeing right now?
Some early results, Aaron, and a split verdict so far in the very early results in these two congressional districts where Donald Trump is airing his grievances, if you will. Let's look up here at the 7th South Carolina congressional district. Russell Fry is the Trump-backed candidate. Tom Rice is the incumbent who voted to impeach Donald Trump. Tom Rice at the moment, 4% of the vote in. Tom Rice is losing quite significantly to Russell Fry. I just want to note, though, we could take a different look at the district and look at it this way. You see where the votes are coming in so far. They are from the rural areas, more in the northwestern part of the district. If Mr. Rice has a chance, it will be with voters down in the Myrtle Beach area, Aaron. But this is a very Republican district. Again, the Trump-backed candidate has the early lead there. Now let's take a look at district number 1. That's where Nancy Mace is the incumbent. Donald Trump would like to have her defeated by the candidate he endorsed, Katie Arrington. But Nancy Mace, look at that, a more than 2-to-1 lead. Again, though, only 3% of the vote in so far. But Nancy Mace, the only vote so far from Charleston County, that is Nancy Mace's base. But early results, you're happy? We got a lot of math to do.
Right. Good to start, but you see where it goes. All right, John King, thank you very much. And we are going to keep an eye on those as that map starts to fill in here through the evening, see if Mace maintains that lead or not. Also tonight, President Biden coming under fire from some in his own party as the White House announces he will meet with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman next month. The White House saying Biden, quote, looks forward to this important visit to Saudi Arabia, which has been a strategic partner of the United States for nearly 8 decades. Now, that is true. It has been a strategic partner for nearly 8 decades. But this, to be clear, is a major reversal from Biden's tough talk on the campaign trail when he vowed to isolate the Saudis and MBS specifically after the 2018 murder and dismemberment of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Khashoggi was, in fact, murdered and dismembered, and I believe in the order of the Crown Prince. And I would make it very clear, we were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are. There's very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia. They have to be held accountable.
It appeared to be genuine, and it appeared to be certainly what he believed. Of course, now he's president. There are other considerations, and so he is planning this visit. By the way, the Biden administration has already sold more than $600 million in weapon systems to Saudi Arabia since Biden took office. Out front now, Democratic Congressman Jerry Connolly of Virginia. Khashoggi lived in his district, and they took this photo together before Khashoggi was murdered and dismembered in an operation ordered by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, according to U.S. intelligence. So, Congressman, you have been a huge advocate for Khashoggi's family. This obviously is a regime in Saudi Arabia known for human rights abuses, but the bone-saw dismemberment and murder of Jamal Khashoggi was a level that shocked the world. Do you think President Biden should be traveling to Saudi Arabia and meeting with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman?
Aaron, obviously the relationship, as you point out, with Saudi Arabia goes back 80 years to FDR. It's complicated. It's layered with lots of concerns and issues. But at the end of the day, I believe President Biden was right when he was candidate Biden about this relationship and holding to account the individual who was complicit in and ordered the brutal murder and dismemberment of my constituent, Jamal Khashoggi, and that is the Crown Prince.
And the Crown Prince, you know, as you said, President Biden, then candidate Biden, was very clear. He said that Khashoggi was murdered and dismembered, and I believe at the order of the Crown Prince. That's what he said. He said, we're not going to sell more weapons to them. He has, in fact, done that. We're going to make them pay the price and make them the pariah. It seemed to me at the time, and that stood out to me, that's what he believes. That is what he believes. He has, of course, as president, had calls with MBS's father, the current king. But why do you think Biden is doing this now? Why has the pressure exceeded what he seems to believe personally?
I believe that he's had counsel from some in the State Department, some on the National Security Council, that the need to bring MBS, the Crown Prince, to account, to justice for his involvement in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi has to be weighed against other concerns. We're experiencing a huge inflationary spiral in the price of oil. We need Saudi Arabia to produce more of it if we're going to bring down the cost of gasoline here in the United States. The Saudis have been reluctant to support sanctions against Russia in the Ukrainian war, and we need their help there. So I think that he's getting advice that if you want their cooperation, they've made it very clear, you've got to stand down in your original position.
Right, and I understand that. I will say, for just a point of consistency, if he thinks it's worth it to bring down oil prices to, or gas prices to do business with Saudi Arabia, wouldn't it be consistent then to be open to pulling back some of the restrictions on refining in the U.S. or drilling in the U.S. as well?
Presumably. But, you know, I think we have to all ask ourselves, all of that's interesting and fine and important, but at what price? I mean, a man was murdered by the #2 official in a foreign government. That can't be acceptable in terms of U.S. interests or U.S. foreign policy, and it ought not to be acceptable to the President of the United States.
Right. Obviously, they are going ahead with this trip. Congressman, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Erin.
And next, a family trapped in Yellowstone captures these images of the devastating impact of the worst flash flooding there on record. A member of that family is out front next. Tonight, extreme weather. Yellowstone National Park closed to visitors as some areas see the worst flooding in over 100 years. And more than 125 million people are under heat alerts as areas in the South and Midwest top 100 degrees. In Columbus, Ohio, the temperature reached 108 degrees. Outside Chicago, planes flipped over due to major wind gusts. And these unsettling conditions extend beyond the U.S. In North America, a massive and bizarre hailstorm in Mexico City, turning the streets into chaotic scenes like this one. Amazing. Mexico City. Parker Manning is out front. He just evacuated Yellowstone with his family after the flooding left them stranded there for days. And Parker, I really appreciate your time. It is fantastic that you were able to get out of Yellowstone. I understand you were able to get out through Highway 89, which also has seen severe flooding, and we've seen some of the dramatic pictures of that. I mean, we're showing it here from the air. I mean, that is stunning and terrifying. I know you took a video of a building being swept up by flooding before you even left Yellowstone, which, I mean, that's surreal to even watch it now. I can only imagine what it was like in real life. Tell me more about how bad the conditions have been.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, the water was rising pretty quick. We were standing on a deck on our cabin that we had rented from VRBO, and watched as the embankment started to slough away and slowly move down and into the water, and watching the water rise, the debris going through. I mean, it was really moving and flowing an enormous amount of water.
So you and your family, I know, were in Yellowstone on vacation. Obviously, you didn't expect to get stuck. I mean, what was your reaction, Parker, when you found out there's nowhere for you to go and water levels are going up?
Yeah, we were very surprised when we got up Monday morning. We were planning on checking out and heading into Yellowstone, and abruptly found out that we were stuck. Everything was closed. Really had no indication of when we might get out. So it was a little bit worrisome, but we just had to kind of go with the flow and make things work. So we were concerned, but not terribly worried. I guess it seemed like the emergency management people in the area were doing a great job trying to organize everything and try to keep people informed of what was going on. So we were actually on a phone call about noon today where they explained that they were able to clear off some debris on the roads, do some minor repairs just to let some traffic out today, and we had a one-time opportunity to evacuate, so we took advantage of it.
Absolutely. I mean, the flooding is unprecedented in the area. Bridges have been completely blown out, roads underwater. I know you're obviously very familiar, with the area. You've spent plenty of time there. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, not in that area. I mean, we have experienced some flooding ourselves in Indiana, but not there in Montana. But yeah, it was very widespread. I mean, the amount of water flowing through there was truly amazing, and to watch that building come off the embankment and float downstream was just, it was crazy.
It's amazing to see it and disturbing. Parker, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm glad you and your family are out. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
And finally tonight, a story we've been following. Top Putin opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been moved to a maximum security prison in Russia. That's according to Russian state media. The facility is reportedly known for the, quote, systematic abuse of inmates. Navalny's team saying it still hasn't received confirmation of his whereabouts and that his family wasn't informed that he would be moved. Navalny was sentenced in March to an additional 9 years in prison. He was arrested when he returned to Russia of his own choice in 2021 after being poisoned with Novichok and nearly dying. Thanks for joining us. AC360 starts now.
CNN tonight. Laura?
Anderson, thank you so much. Once again, it's an election night in America. And once again, we are waiting to see what message exactly is resonating with Republican voters in places like South Carolina. Results of some new key tests of Donald Trump's power over his party there and, of course, elsewhere. Now, they say that revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, let's see whether voters in states where Republican incumbents refuse to precisely follow Trump will find themselves now on the menu. It's not that this is the first time that Trump's personal persona non gratas have been challenged, but these are the first so-called Trump revenge primaries, you could say, at least since the January 6th committee hearings have gotten underway. Now, the first time since the broader electorate has had an opportunity to at least hear testimony about the events leading up to the insurrection and Donald Trump's possible role in fomenting and pushing known election lies. Known because even his family members and top Republican aides were adamant that there simply was no there there. Now, Trump is not on any of these ballots, but the connective tissue is a platform that echoes his sentiments. But as much as the committee has tried to convey that what we saw on January 6th is a continued threat, the question is whether these hearings impact the voters at all, perhaps giving them any pause about electing a Trump-backed candidate, assuming, of course, they even watched these hearings. And even still, the 2020 lies are casting a very big shadow over many of these 2022 races, particularly in South Carolina, where the polls have now closed, but votes are still being counted. So here's where that revenge part comes in again. You've got two incumbent Republican members of Congress in this deep red state, and they're fighting to stay after breaking with the ex-president over his lies. Tom Rice is one of 10 Republicans in the House who voted to impeach Trump for incitement of insurrection. Now, you have Nancy Mace, who bucked Trump and voted to certify President Biden's victory on just her third day in the U.S. Congress. So, perhaps unsurprisingly, Trump has now thrown his weight behind both of their challengers. His debunked fraud claims are also at the center of GOP contests in the swing state of Nevada tonight. Polls there are still open until the end of this hour, so stay tuned on that. And running for Senate with the Trump stamp of approval is former State Attorney General Adam Laxalt, who once filed lawsuits attempting to overturn Trump's loss in Nevada. It's a key race that could impact who controls the chamber in November, and a good chance, frankly, for the GOP to flip a Democratic seat. Now, Laxalt is running against Army veteran Sam Brown. And then there's the raised Secretary of State over there. The question now is, will voters choose a vocal proponent of Trump's stolen election claims to oversee future elections now in Nevada?
Myself and my opponents, I'm the only one that believes that there was election fraud.
That's Jim Marchant, who attended QAnon conventions and is now known for supporting conspiracy theories. He's on the campaign trail that if he were Secretary of State in 2020, that he wouldn't have certified Biden's victory. Now, many voters have already nominated dozens of Republican candidates for state and also federal office who have backed Trump's false fraud claims. In fact, at least 108, according to a new tally by the Washington Post. So the question for the committee and everyone watching is, will the revelations we've learned through these hearings stop that in its tracks? stop the trajectory of it all. Well, the thing is, the art of persuasion requires those revelations from the committee to be fully accurate. Remember when the panel accused the Trump campaign just yesterday of using election lies to swindle supporters of money? Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren called it the big ripoff, and later on CNN pointed to one example of Donald Trump Jr.'s fiancée, Kimberly Guilfoyle, getting paid about $60,000 to speak for about 2.5 minutes at the Stop the Steal rally on January 6th. Now, sources tell CNN today that it was actually a conservative, pro-Trump organization called Turning Point Action who gave Guilfoyle that big paycheck. So CNN did its due diligence and went back to Lofgren, and she said this.
Did you mischaracterize that payment?
Oh, I don't think so. It's a part and parcel of the Trump campaign. But the question is, are Trump individuals benefiting from this whole enterprise of raising money around the so-called Stop the Steal? And the answer is yes.
Let the voters decide whether it was a think so or a definitely not. The committee also just released more testimony of Trump campaign attorney Eric Hirschman, talking about how he warned conservative lawyer John Eastman to back off his plans to file appeals in Georgia back in 2020. Now, we heard some of this yesterday, but not all.
I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, I only want to hear 2 words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition. Eventually he said, orderly transition. I said, good, John. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it. And then I hung up on him.
Remember, the soundbite stopped yesterday at the only tell me 2 of those words. This is all really coming down to a test of credibility. Both Trump, of course, and what we've been hearing from the January 6th committee themselves. And ultimately, it's up to the voters to decide what they believe and who they believe, and whether they want to move past January 6th or beyond it, or have a yearning to learn even more. I'm joined now by Michelle Cottle from the New York Times editorial board, Casey Hunt, our chief national affairs analyst, and Ramesh Ponnuru, the editor for National Review. I'm glad you're all here with me today. I'm wondering, first of all, when you hear and think more about this test of all these primaries, a lot of focus has been on Donald Trump. He's not on any of these ballots. He casts quite a very big shadow, but also a wide net on those who have gone against him. Do you think that he will be triumphant in being able to serve that revenge?
Well, I think we're finding that in these primaries, Trump's endorsement matters more than any other person's endorsement. It is valuable. It is very valuable to these candidates, and these candidates will do a lot, and sometimes at the cost of their own dignity, in order to get that endorsement. But other things like the quality of the candidate, the issue, the nature of the particular electorate, they matter too. Right now, for example, in those 2 South Carolina races, Nancy Mace is running ahead of where Tom Rice is running, because partly it's a different district. Mace has got a more moderate district than Rice, and partly because Mace basically criticized Trump and didn't vote with him on some issues. Rice actually voted to impeach him, and I think that's a different kind of line for a lot of Republican voters.
Yet they have the same fate in many ways, right? You can say, 3rd day in Congress, I'm going to certify the President of the United States of having won, but that's a bridge too far. And she has the same fate in terms of not being endorsed by Trump. Is that the new standard?
Well, she also has a different kind. I mean, the person that Trump endorsed against her has run before in that district and lost.
To a Democrat.
So it's a different kind of district. It's a different kind of setup. And, you know, Trump has endorsed candidates before who just haven't cut it. I mean, David Perdue in Georgia was an absolute disaster running against Brian Kemp. Now, my contingent, Georgia was a question of a governor versus a congressperson, which tends to be a little bit different. Governors have their own brand, that people tend to kind of already have a little bit of brand loyalty. But again, you know, also with the Secretary of State down there, Brad Raffensperger, Trump endorsed his opponent and kind of recruited Jody Heiss to get in there, and he lost in that case as well. So it does matter what the candidates are like, kind of what their records are, and also just kind of what the district and the constituencies are.
I think we have to be a little bit careful about reading too much Trump into every single political thing that's going on, because he's clearly a factor. I mean, he's become, are you Republican enough? Are you to the right enough? Are you Trumpy enough is now the test, right? And so in one of these races tonight, it looks like Congressman Rice, who voted for impeachment, is on track to lose. He may not even make it into a runoff, which would really be kind of a rebuke and a repudiation. But you got to keep in mind, again, the geography. I mean, he's up in the Myrtle Beach area of South Carolina. It's more conservative. It's more populist, honestly. I'm looking for kind of the right word to say Trumpy without describing it exactly that way. And also, the former president has really taken it upon himself to particularly target those who were willing to vote for impeachment. I mean, that is like the ultimate sin in his view. The other race, I mean, Nancy Mace criticized him. She also, to a certain extent, tried to make some amends. I mean, she went up to Trump Tower and shot a video of herself in front of it. Rice has not done that. He's not shown any remorse or any kind of concern about what he did. That district, as Ramesh pointed out, it's more moderate. It's Charleston. Part of it is, there's a lot of transplants down there, that kind of country club conservatives. Maybe some of them are never Trumpers. If you're looking at some of the early results that have been coming in so far tonight, the areas that are to the north of Charleston, a little bit more rural, a lot more conservative, those are going for Katie Arrington. She's someone who was like a particularly Trumpy candidate all the way along, to the point that she lost to a Democrat in this district. And I think, that's what Republicans writ large are concerned about, right? They are concerned that Trump will select candidates that are frankly, like, not okay for some of these other areas. I mean, that's what Mitch McConnell was worried about in Georgia. They lost 2 Senate seats in Georgia because of this.
Well, one of the concerns I have, and maybe it's the reason you were unable to find another word for Trumpy, because you hear the committee, and frankly, it's been read into everything. There were, before the committee hearings, there were thoughts of, will they focus on Trump? Will they try to make this a singular focus? Will that be the goal here, or to make it more broad? And in doing so, I've often wondered, is this feeding into the hands of being able to say, hey, the same former president who would say, they're after me, they're after you, they're trying to go through me, they're after you, though. Does this actually legitimize some of the claims that people who might not be watching are saying, see, it's all about Trump for you all, so why not make it about Trump?
But it is about Trump, right? Because the committee hearing is mostly about, honestly, 2024.
Well, no, the committee hearing is about Trump, but should these primaries be about Trump? You yourself talked about the idea of not reading into every situation.
But Trump has worked so very hard to make these primaries about him. I mean, he has put money into them. He has gone to rallies. He talks it up in terms of, they're backing me, they're loyal, they're perfect. And he is working the entire field. I mean, he has handed out tons of endorsements. I mean, mostly to front runners and incumbents, so that he can rack up some
to say, like, hey, I support you.
To pat his numbers, to say that
he's a good record. That's exactly it. He's gone out on a limb in only a few cases, and sometimes he's changed his mind when it looks like his,
look at
original
Alabama.
candidate.
Like, I'm sorry, but we're back and forth and back again in the Alabama Senate race. I mean, I think when you're talking about the January 6th committee hearings and kind of how they relate to the midterm elections, I honestly think the reality is they don't relate much at all, because people who are voting in these elections have pretty much made up their mind about it. But what the committee is trying to do is make a case that this guy shouldn't be the nominee in 2024.
Well,
right,
and that matters. What was interesting is the only thing we all agreed on was that Trump was padding his margin. I don't know what that says about anything about other discussions, but okay. Stay with us. There's more to come in just a moment here. And coming up, not even our libraries are safe from hate. The Proud Boys storming in and spreading fear at a drag queen story hour. Did social media inspire them? We're going to get an update on the criminal investigation and what the performer is saying about all this next. A hate crime investigation is underway tonight after a group of men with ties to the hate group, the Proud Boys, stormed a San Francisco area library while it hosted a Pride Month event known as Drag Queen Story Hour. Now, keep in mind, children were inside of that room. Now, the police say that the group of at least 5 men wore offensive T-shirts and shouted anti-gay and anti-trans slurs while also flashing white power hand signs. They directed their aggression toward drag performer Panda Dulce as she read a storybook to children.
They said, "Who brought the tranny? It's a groomer. it's a pedophile. Why do you bring your kids to this event? A lot of people are asking me, like, do you feel safe? Are you okay? And the answer is no, I don't. I don't feel safe in my own home.
Remember, this wasn't the only threat that involved a far-right group and an LGBTQ event. That same day in Idaho, police arrested 31 white supremacists who planned to riot at a local pride event. They arrested on charges of conspiracy to riot. So the question is, will there be charges in this California case? Lieutenant Ray Kelly is the spokesman for the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, which is investigating the entire incident. Lieutenant, thank you for being here today. When we hear about what has happened there, I keep thinking in my mind, of course, that there were children who were at this event, children who were witnessing the Proud Boys arrive on scene and do this very thing. I understand that you actually had some hate crime protocols that were then followed in even investigating this incident. Tell me about that.
Well, absolutely. When we learned of this incident, initially when we got there, the disturbance had kind of dissipated and de-escalated itself. And we didn't know a lot of the dynamics of what had gone on until we began to have conversations after the fact. Our subsequent investigation into this has caused us some concern. And so we did activate our hate crime protocol, which will take us on an investigative course looking at this case through a hate crime lens, in particular against our Pride community and our LGBT community here in Alameda County.
Now, how were you first alerted to the incident itself? And if you could describe a little bit more about what that hate crime protocol looks like.
So we first learned of the incident after 911. Our deputies responded to that scene for a report of a disturbance. Upon arriving there, the scene was much less chaotic than has been described by Panda Dolce in the previous video. It was much more benign. We were able to contact 5 individuals who identified themselves as members of the Proud Boy organization, and they had told us that they took exception at the library story hour and that they were there to protest that event. We began to be concerned when, in talking to the organizer, when they expressed the threats of violence, the threats of fear, the transphobic and homophobic language that was used against our event organizer. And so that is bringing us in a different direction. Right now, we're trying to focus on getting all the information. There's video out there. There's video from the library. There's video that's been taken by people involved in the event. And so our investigators are compiling all of that information. We'll collect all that data and information and reports, and then we'll send it to our district attorney and have those legal experts look at this case from a hate crimes perspective.
And of course, we'll have to balance the notion of what will be the obvious retort of, hey, under the First Amendment, I have every right to be in this public space in a library. But of course, if there were threats of violence, if there were other charges that could be brought, they'll explore those. But tell me about these individual men who were involved here. Are they from the community? Because it might surprise people to know. I mean, we're talking about an area that really, near the Bay Area, the epicenter of the Pride movement. I'm shocked that this is happening there in particular, as if it should be okay in any place in the world, of course. But there in particular, were these men from your community?
So they're not from Alameda County in particular, which is the eastern portion of the Bay Area, but we know that they're from certain communities within the Bay Area. They're a small group of individuals, and they do not represent this. You know, we are the epicenter of Pride. And a lot of the civil rights actions that have taken place over many decades has started here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so we usually Pride Month in June is very uneventful for us. There's hundreds of events that go on throughout the Bay Area, and they go off without a hitch. We were very surprised that our little library in San Lorenzo became kind of a point of contention with this group. And so that's been very disturbing to our library workers and the people that go to that library. And so thankfully, we've already spent a lot of time at that library ourselves. We host a reading program there, and those relationships have paid off. But there's a lot of uncertainty, and then this has stirred a lot of debate nationally. And so the library has been the focal point of a lot of for and against this issue.
Well, Lieutenant, it's also disturbing, of course, and the focal point, I want to play for you a little bit more of what the performer Panda Dulce had to say about how this particular incident really was triggering for a number of reasons and felt different than previous instances that he was aware of at some point. Here it is.
I think what felt different about this time is how emboldened they were. They marched right in with their cameras. They were just very confident in what they stood for. And whereas before it was just a small smattering of folks wielding Jesus signs, this time it felt very close to violence.
When you hear, and excuse me, her pronoun is she, when you hear what she had to say about that and the idea of the proximity to violence, how are there ways to reassure this particular community in particular in your area that this is not on a different trajectory?
Well, I think that's very true. And I think that when people have feelings and how they feel is important. And I know that in this particular incident, some of the individuals were wearing shirts that had weapons and rifles on the shirts and that had language about killing pedophiles. And I can imagine that when they entered the room with children in a peaceful area like a library, that it was very aggressive and very alarming. And I'm sure that those feelings that she experienced are very valid. And so, but that is one of the main concerns too, is the fact that you cannot go into a library and annoy or harass or cause a disturbance with children in California. It is a crime. And so that's one of the angles we'll be looking at. Also looking at any criminal threats that might have been made during this situation. And so we're taking all that into account. I think our community knows us pretty well in Alameda County. They know their sheriff's office pretty well. They know how serious we've been taking this. We've put out very strong statements in regards to this. And tomorrow we'll be meeting with Congressman Swalwell. We'll be at the library to reassure the community that they're safe and that their sheriff's office and their local law enforcement is going to be there to support them in future endeavors during the Pride Month.
Thank you, Lieutenant Ray Kelly. I appreciate your time. We're actually going to look at the threats across this country, including the Supreme Court. New details in the alleged murder plot against Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And former Homeland Security Secretary, Janet Napolitano, joins me to talk about the growing domestic terror danger. Next. Just one person may have stood in the way of last week's alleged murder plot against Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The police say that in the moments after suspect Nicholas Roski arrived outside of Kavanaugh's Maryland home, he texted his sister about his intentions, and she was the one to convince him to call 911 on himself. That makes today's passage of a bill that would extend security protections to Supreme Court justices' immediate family members all the more significant. Joining me now, Janet Napolitano, former Homeland Security Secretary under President Obama. Secretary, thank you for being here tonight. You know, it's alarming to hear that this was the one person who possibly was able to foil an assassination plot by convincing this person to go to authorities. But we're seeing an enormous increase from the DHS's bulletin last week. It talks about the rise of people willing to turn to violence to address personal or political grievances. What's been your reaction to all this news unfolding?
Well, you know, domestic extremism has been a problem in our country for decades, if not centuries. I remember in 1995 working on the Oklahoma City bombing case with Tim McVeigh. But what we're seeing now seems to be of a different quality and kind. The number and types of incidents seems to be proliferating. And from the segment you just showed about the invasion of a children's hour at a public library to the arrests in Idaho over the weekend to the individual who actually, in a way, turned himself in, but who had crossed the country in order to attack Justice Kavanaugh. These are all of a different, as I mentioned, quality and kind than we have seen before. The increase is alarming.
And the increase, I want to show the audience, and what I'm showing them right now, Secretary, is that the threats and the inappropriate communications against the judiciary, it's actually increased since 2021. It's up 587%. I mean, up 587%. I wonder what you attribute, although this has been unfortunately perpetually evergreen, the notion that people are willing to at least have some form of the domestic terrorism you're speaking about. What's different now? Is it the proliferation of social media and the ability to sort of find one's echo chamber and be able to galvanize in that way? Is that what might be different now?
That's certainly a big part of it. Social media has become like gasoline on a fire. It's an accelerant. And in terms of the attacks on the judiciary, part of it may be the fact that the judiciary seems ever more in the news on ever more controversial items. So they've become bigger and bigger targets. And, you know, it's unacceptable in our country that this should happen. You know, judges need to be able to do their jobs without having to have marshals outside in their driveways. Librarians ought to be able to have children's hours without worrying about Proud Boys coming in. Parades ought to be able to happen without 31 armed men coming in to try to disrupt them. And where it really gets worrisome is when it goes from active protests all the way now to attempted violence or acts of violence.
Secretary, I mean, to paraphrase James Baldwin, he often said, I love this country more than anyone else in any other country, which is why I reserve the right to perpetually criticize it. I emphasize the word criticize, using the ballot box, of course, and elections and being able to vocalize one's position. But you're right, we have turned a very different corner now. The idea of people using the redress of grievances in this way. What should be done in terms of preparing for this, though? If this is the trajectory, that criticism is no longer in the Baldwin-esque space and now turning to violence in a more prevalent way, how does the government prepare? How does the government try to deter and prevent?
So I think from a federal government perspective, the Department of Homeland Security needs to do all it can to share relevant information to local communities, particularly to police departments and sheriff's offices. The FBI needs to be leaning forward into this. This clearly needs to be the top priority from a law enforcement perspective as we head into what could be a long, hot summer.
Secretary Napolitano, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, President Biden is trying to reassure Americans about the economy as we go towards that perhaps long, hot, expensive summer, acknowledging the painful realities of our current inflation crisis and whether anything good can come out of his plan to meet with Saudi Arabia's MBS, given his record on human rights. I'll be back with Michelle, Casey, and Ramesh next. So here's the oxymoronic statement or state of our economy and our politics. Tomorrow, the Federal Reserve is set to enact the largest interest rate hike in decades, meaning the biggest move yet to fight higher prices is to make Americans pay more for a home, a car, and of course, a credit card. This at a time when you are keeping paying more every time you fill up. So news today that the Producer Price Index, another key inflation measure, showed a slight slowdown is actually little comfort. You know that even as more people go back to work, companies are struggling to fill jobs. Even as workers make more money, it's still harder to feed your family or keep a roof over your head. This is uncharted territory for politics as well. I mean, going back to Reagan, as unemployment goes down, a president's approval numbers, well, they usually go up. But under Biden, unemployment has dropped quickly. Yet his approval numbers, especially on the economy and inflation, well, they're deep underwater. Let's try to make sense of all this with Michelle Cottle, Casey Hunt, and Ramesh Ponnuru, who are going to break down and solve all the world problems in this time slot right now. It's very difficult, though, to think about this. I mean, why is this sort of an inverse happening? Is it the confluence of everything else, or is Biden just not getting it right?
So I think that we have had some exceptions to the rule where when we've had unemployment drop and we've had economic growth, but we've also had people thinking the economy was very bad. And what those periods tend to have in common is that wages are dropping, that what you can command for a paycheck is going down. And that's been true of this economy too, because wages have been growing, but they have not been keeping up with prices because prices are growing even faster. That's something that makes people unhappy, and more people are paying money at the pump, they're paying at the grocery bill, than are struggling with problems of unemployment, and so it hits more voters.
Yeah, so is the economy stupid still?
You can tell people that the economy is doing well. You can tell people that wages, are fine, and you can tell them that unemployment is really low. But when they go to the store, they know that what they're making is not covering things. Plus, you have supply chain issues. You have shortages of everything from baby formula to now there's some new tampon shortage. It's one of these things where people know things aren't working well in their life. Plus, everybody's still extremely sour about this pandemic. Yeah. I mean, we are tired of COVID.
I'm sorry, is anyone at this table, is this the happiest time in anyone's life? Let's be real, it's been a miserable 2.5 years. People are miserable, and things are starting to get a little bit better, but every time it seems like we take one step forward, it's like there's 2 steps back. And, and many people, who make the least amount of money are the ones that are most affected by this, because inflation is just so regressive. It affects, people who don't have extra cash or have to take out loans, for example, to cover basic needs.
If they qualify for the loans,
if
right?
they can,
that's even
or
part
they
of
have
the
to put it on the credit card, if that's something that's available to them. And if not, then they're, in even worse straits.
And I was talking to a politician who started his career in the late 70s during the last great burst of inflation in the United States, and he was making this point that it's not just the economic consequences of inflation that matter to voters. As important as those are, there's also another layer, which is that it undermines people's sense of control and order and stability. It makes it feel like the ground is shifting beneath their feet.
And it probably wants to enhance as well who they want to blame for it. Because thinking about that, I want to play for you what Biden had to say about an issue, because he's been trying to, in many ways, assign the blame in other directions about why people are so unhappy. And by telling them, you're happy, is not making them happy all of a sudden. Let's hear what President Biden had to say.
I'm doing everything in my power to blunt Putin's gas price hike. Exxon made more money than God this year. Ted Cruz and the other ultra-MAGA Republicans are going to vote on whether you'll have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
So is he pointing the blame in the right direction? Is this feeling like deflection, displacement? What do you think?
It doesn't really matter. The reality of politics is if you are the president, you are going to take the blame for this sort of thing. If people are feeling bad about the direction the country is going in, if they are feeling bad about how much their paycheck can get them, how expensive gas prices are, you can talk to them all day long about the war in Ukraine, about supply side shortages, about China. You can talk to them about whatever. The president's going to take the hit for it.
And the reality is, Democrats were wrong about inflation. Janet Yellen acknowledged as much just a few days ago. She said, they insisted it was going to be transitory, it probably wasn't going to be that big of a deal, and that was incorrect. And I think voters saw that happen. They know who's running the government, and they're going to take it out on the people in charge. It doesn't really matter who else might be to blame. That's the main strategy going into a midterm, is to say, well, the other guy would be a lot worse. But the reality is it's just not that effective.
Well, there's also a time when sometimes if you're a flip-flopper or not acknowledging you got something wrong or talking in absolutes can be problematic as a politician. But then there's this new issue that's happening with President Biden, where he is talking about going to have a visit in Saudi Arabia with MBS. And I remember, if you remember as well, there was a time on the campaign trail when he spoke about wanting to make this nation a pariah and spoke in very absolute terms on this issue. And now he is going there. I want to play for you what some of the people in his own party have said about this very issue and how they would not go. It's not just Republicans against Democrats. This is an intra-party conflict now. Let's listen in.
I wouldn't go. I wouldn't shake his hand. This is someone who butchered an American resident, cut him up into pieces in the most terrible and premeditated way.
I will support President Biden in his outreach to MBS and to the Saudi kingdom.
I have every confidence that that President Biden will handle this very well.
He has every confidence. What do you guys think?
I think this is about politics more than anything else. And it just underscores how difficult the politics are for the president right now of what's going on with gas prices. It shows you it's really everything, because they are having to give up a lot They're losing a lot of faith. I mean, DC is renaming the street in front of the Saudi embassy Khashoggi Way, right? Like that's what's going on here in this country, and the president's still willing to go do this.
Well, if that's what's happening, and you think about how this is going to play out politically down the road and what goes on next, I mean, politics is going to have its place, and it still is today. We'll wait for the primary results as well. Michelle, Casey, Ramesh, thank you so much for being here tonight. Up next, a black driver behind the wheel was speeding. A white police officer pulls the car over. Now, if you think you know where this is going, just wait until you learn what happens next. Frankly, it's one of the most heartwarming stories you've probably heard in a while, and we all need it. And we have two very special guests who are going to help share that important moment next and explain this picture. A traffic stop with a twist. CNN writer John Blake brings us the story from South Carolina, where Ashley Wilkerson was driving with her father, Tony, back in March, when a state trooper pulled her over for speeding. Now, as she apologized, her father started defending her, mustering his strength to tell the trooper that his, quote, baby girl, unquote, was driving him home from his chemotherapy treatment. Now, that detail touched the officer's heart so much that instead of a speeding ticket, he offered instead a prayer. Ashley described the encounter in an Instagram post honoring her dad, Tony, writing, quote, the officer took a deep breath, he sighed, and he said that he too had loved ones who battled cancer as well. He asked if he could pray with you, and when you all were done, there was a small silver cross that he placed in your hand for you to keep with you as a symbol of your faith. Now, sadly, 2 months later, Tony lost his battle with cancer. But Ashley is still in touch with the trooper who was so kind to them both. His name is Jarrett Doty, and he and Ashley join me now. It's so nice to see both of you here today. It's so often that we don't have as feel-good stories about traffic stops, but this one, when I read about it, it just touched my heart. I wonder if your perspective, Ashley, what went through your mind when you first heard those sirens and saw and heard your father trying to defend his baby girl?
Well, first, let me say thank you so much for having me today to be able to speak about the man that is near and dear to my heart, my dad, especially this Father's Day weekend that's upcoming. Obviously, you never want to hear sirens and you never want to see the blue lights flash behind you. And so the first question was, Ash, that's what my dad would refer to me as. Ash, is that for you? Is that behind you? And I said, I don't know, Dad. Let me check. Let me look. And so I looked at my speed. I looked for a speed limit sign to my right. And I said, yes, Dad, I'm speeding. That's for me. And so I immediately pulled over to the right side so that I could be summoned by the officer at that time.
And he's here with us now, that very officer who was behind you. And I know that you have said that you don't want to make this about you and really wanted to honor not only Ashley, but also her father. But something about the way he stood up for his baby girl really touched your heart. You felt a kind of kinship with him in that moment. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, ma'am. Again, I echo what Ashley said. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be on your show. Yes, I did relate to him in that manner. I have a 12-year-old daughter myself, and she's my little princess, like Ashley was to her daddy. And when I first approached the vehicle, I introduced myself to her. I told her who I was and why I stopped her. I requested for her driver's license and registration, and while she was getting those things is when Mr. Gaddis spoke up and told me that was his baby girl, and he was she was bringing him home from chemotherapy at Duke Hospital. I noticed he was laying back in his seat. He was very soft-spoken. His voice was a little raspy. He just looked like he was tired and, a sick man. And at that moment in time, my heart just went out to him.
In fact, you battled your own health conditions as well, and so you had recognized some parts of yourself within his experience, and you didn't even realize, I understand, Ashley, you were so taken aback by the fact that he came back and asked instead, he gave you a warning, first of all, for speeding, allegedly. I would say allegedly, I'm a lawyer, so allegedly speeding. He gave you that warning, of course, and then he asked if he could pray with you, and you snapped that photograph. He wasn't even aware of that very moment. What made you want to take that picture and capture that moment?
Well, you know, for two reasons. The first reason, my dad was a very, very private person about his journey battling cancer. He battled colon cancer for 2 years. And so he was very private. And I was actually shocked that he disclosed that information to the officer. Matter of fact, I asked him, Dad, why did you tell the officer your condition? And he said, I wouldn't want you penalized for taking care of me. I never want you to get in trouble. I wouldn't want that on my conscience. And so that was the first and foremost reason, is because even in his sick moment, as you mentioned, he passed away 2 months after that date, he was still working to defend me and protect me. And he didn't want me to get in trouble at that time. So that was the first reason. But the second reason is because the Officer Doughty leaned into his humanity in that moment. Oftentimes when we are tasked to do a job, especially a job like that where you're trained to give a ticket, to give the citation, he leaned into his humanity at that moment. He listened. He heard my dad's voice. He saw his ailing condition. He recognized the pouch that was on my dad at the time that signaled that he had been in treatment, and he was concerned. And so he took it a step beyond, and he cared in that moment. He nurtured us in that moment, and he offered prayer with my dad. He said, if it doesn't offend you, is it okay if I pray with you? And my dad was the chairman of the deacon board, and so he welcomed the prayer, and I took it. Neither one of them knew at the time, and my dad did not like social media. So
and yet Ashley, I'll leave with this moment, because you say he leaned into humanity, and one thing that you've kept is what he leaned in and put into the palm of your father's hand, and it's the picture we have here of this cross that he gave to your father. I know you treasure it today. A family man himself, Ashley Wilkerson, Trooper Jarrett Doughty, thank you both for this story. I think we all needed to hear about someone leaning in to their humanity today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Officer Doughty.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Ashley.
We'll be right back.
You too.
Thanks for watching. Don Lemon Tonight starts right now. Hey, Don.
Hi. Thank you very much, Laura. I will see you again tomorrow evening. This is Don Lemon Tonight. Results coming in right now in key primary election races all across the country, and we're seeing a test of Donald Trump's grip on the Republican Party. Voters going to the polls one day after dramatic testimony where the January 6th committee showed what went on behind the scenes at the White House after President Trump was told that he lost the election but refused to believe it and instead pushed his election lies. And we're watching two key races in South Carolina. That's where two GOP members of the House are fighting to win renomination, both facing candidates backed by the former president. Representative Tom Rice is in one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach the former president after the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Representative Nancy Mace did not vote to impeach Trump, but she refused to join the pack of House Republicans who tried to block certification of Joe Biden's victory and has been aligning herself with the former president ever since. And polls just closed in Nevada, where a Trump-backed candidate is running for the Republican Senate nomination. And in South Carolina, we're seeing more results coming in. And that's why I have the best of the best with me right now, straight away to CNN's chief national correspondent, Mr. John King, who's at the Magic Wall, and CNN's political director, Mr. David Chalian. So good to have both of you on. Thank you so much. I'm going to start with you, John. Key primaries tonight. Polls just closed in Nevada. What's happening there?
So we looked on, you still see this is the Senate Republican primary map in gray. Let me pull this up. We have no votes in this race, but you mentioned this is a test of Donald Trump's grip. In Nevada, it's also a test of Republican strength. They believe that if they get the best candidates tonight, Republicans think they can do some serious business in Nevada come November. They think they can win the governor's race. It's a Democratic incumbent there. They think they can win the Senate race. It's a Democratic incumbent there. They think they can pick up House seats. They have a Secretary of State candidate in the Republican primary tonight running on the big lie. So there's a lot at stake in Nevada tonight. And then in November, Adam Lack Laxalt is Donald Trump's candidate in this Senate primary against Army veteran Sam Brown. Adam Laxalt, from a famous Republican family, he has been a big proponent, still continues to insist to this day that the election in Nevada was off the rails and rigged. There is zero evidence of that, Don, but that's what Adam Laxalt says. No votes in yet. We'll get them shortly. The polls are now closed, and we will see. But this is one. Trump was for Laxalt. Sam Brown ran a surprisingly strong campaign. A lot of Republicans giving him credit. They expect Laxalt to win, but we'll be counting votes soon.
All right, South Carolina, John, polls have been closed for a few hours there. Tell us what you're seeing.
So let's come across. I'm going to switch the map here to House Republican primaries and bring this up. And you see the state here. You mentioned Tom Rice at the top of the program. He is well behind. We have not called this yet because we're waiting votes to come in, and it's the House primary. But you can see right here, an estimate of 96% of the vote counted. Russell Fry is endorsed by Trump. Why? Because Tom Rice voted to impeach Donald Trump, and Donald Trump was looking for a candidate in a revenge match here, if you will. The incumbent, Tom Rice, is getting 25% of the vote right now. If you round that up, that's pretty depressing for him in a Republican primary on his home turf, a district he's represented since the Tea Party year in 2012. So it is 50% if you round that up to 26 at the moment as you see this comes in. That's one, and so Trump seems to be winning that grudge match there. We're waiting for the final call. And then you mentioned the second race here. Nancy Mace is a freshman. She did not get to vote on impeachment, but you're right. She was, at the beginning of her term, harshly critical of Donald Trump, saying he had responsibility for January 6th. She has since tried to say, hey, I can get along with Trump. I can do business with Trump. But she's ahead, 57% estimated of that vote in. It's a closer race, an 8-point race there right now. Katie Arrington lost in this district before to a Democrat. She's running against Nancy Mace in the primary. Mace is ahead, still counting votes.
David Chalian. As John just laid out in South Carolina, Representative Tom Rice and Representative Nancy Mace, they chose different paths on how to navigate this whole Trump issue, right, as they are running. Is it clear yet what Republican voters think of those choices?
Well, it's clear that Tom Rice is in a heap of trouble. You saw his opponent, Russell Fry, who Donald Trump has endorsed, is at 49.9%. If he gets over that 50%, mark there, he's going to avoid a runoff and just win it outright potentially tonight. So that would be a big deal. And that clearly shows that for the Republican electorate there in that district in South Carolina, the vote to impeach Donald Trump for his behavior in the lead up to, on the day of, in the aftermath of January 6th, well, that is anathema to what they're looking for. That seems pretty clear from the results that are coming in there. Now, you noted there was a different path for Nancy Mace. I mean, she went up to Trump Tower in Manhattan and filmed herself in front of it. She is still very much aligning herself with Donald Trump, despite not being his preferred candidate. And, you see now a close race there, but Nancy Mace, with 57% of the vote in, is slightly ahead. She's got 53%. And perhaps in her district, being Trump-aligned but not having his endorsement is good enough to move through here. We have much more counting to do in that district, Don.
So Trump's election lie, David, is front and center in the 1-6 hearings on Capitol Hill. It's also playing a big role in tonight's contest. Can you talk to us more about that?
Well, it is front and center up on Capitol Hill. I don't know how clear it is how big a role that it's playing. I mean, think about this. The 1-6 committee, a lot of what they're putting forth, while much more in depth and some new information, a lot of this is the narrative that unfolded in that second impeachment of Trump, the one that Tom Rice actually in the House voted to impeach Donald Trump, voted to get that indictment, if you will, over to the Senate for that trial. So the very same issues that the 1-6 committee are putting front, Tom Rice staked his career on, basically, and seems to be coming up short tonight. So these issues are still front and center because so much of the Republican Party is still committed to the notion that the 2020 election wasn't legitimate.
Yeah. John and David, thank you standing by. We'll get back in this broadcast if we get some updates. We appreciate that. Now I want to turn to, I said I had the best of the best. Now I have the best of the best of the best. CNN senior political analyst John Avlon and political commentator Margaret Hoover, host of Firing Line on PBS. And if you heard like some commotion there, that was Margaret dropping her phone.
I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
How are you guys doing?
Good, man. It's so good to see you.
So anything, John, I'll start with you. Anything you want to add to anything that
Yeah, well, you know, I used to live in South Carolina, 1st District, Charleston, South Carolina. It's a very different district than Tom Rice.
Yeah.
Those numbers are tough for Tom Rice, but that is a very, very conservative part of the state, despite the fact of being coastal. Nancy Mace represents Charleston, South Carolina, surrounding areas. It's more of a swing district. And even though this is a Republican primary, yeah, her vote is not going to be a disqualifier. But you have to say that, Tom Rice is facing a tough penalty for doing the honest thing, which is standing up against a lie.
Well, look, considering everything that is happening, there's been more than 100 GOP primary winners who back Trump's false fraud claims, and that's according to the Washington Post analysis. So what are midterms going to look like if that is the price of admission to the GOP?
Yeah. Look, what I am looking for and what concerns me most, because especially as we look at the line by line of what happened on January 6th and the days following the election, the days following January 6th, is what kind of Republican are we sending back to the House of Representatives? What kind of Republican is getting through the primaries? And what I'm most concerned about is we're going to have Republicans that support the Constitution and are willing to certify the next presidential election. All right? So not the ones who are buying into the big lie, the ones who have demonstrated that their fealty, while they may say it's to Donald Trump, when it has come down to voting in the past, their fealty has been to the Constitution.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why, Nancy Mace, her first vote in Congress was to the Constitution, not to Donald Trump. So while she's been all over the map since then, I suspect that she, if she's forced to make that vote again in 2025 January, she will vote with the Constitution again, whereas I'm not so sure her primary challenger
So you're concerned
would.
about that?
I am.
Is that what voters are concerned about? Because that's the whole point then.
But look, I mean, I do think at the end of the day, defending democracy should be something that unites us. Obviously, it doesn't. But if you're a constitutional conservative, you should be supporting, the Constitution. I think Margaret does lay out the broader stakes exactly right, though. Look, that stat, 100 Republicans who've won primary votes back the big lie.
Yeah.
That's problematic. That's deeply disturbing. But we've also seen a lot of big races where there have been split decisions done, like we may be seeing in South Carolina tonight, where a Trump-backed candidate wins one race, but a candidate who's standing up to Donald Trump wins another. That's a hopeful sign that there's still some daylight left in the Republican Party for real principles.
Do you believe it, as some have?
Of course there is. I mean, Brad Raffensperger won his as though there was no clue that there was a sign that there's daylight in the Republican Party for people who. Thank you. Okay, so tonight's not your only example.
No, it's not at all.
Don't you think that
it's not much.
Georgia may be a little bit different than South Carolina, especially considering Brad Raffensperger in Atlanta and the huge No
question. They're different states. They're fundamentally different states.
Raffensperger's win was a huge rebuke to Donald Trump.
Yeah. So listen, I want to talk about this tonight. The 1-6 committee teasing their new hearing on Thursday. A new video clip. It's of Donald Trump's White House lawyer, Eric Hirschman, and he talks about the conversation that he had with conservative attorney John Eastman the day after January 6th. Watch that.
He started to ask me about something dealing with Georgia and preserving something potentially for appeal. And I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, I only want to hear two words coming out of your mouth from now on. Orderly transition. And I screamed, I said, I don't want to hear any other effing words coming out of your mouth, no matter what, other than orderly transition. Repeat those words to me. And I screamed, and he said, eventually he said, orderly transition. I said, good, John. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it.
Wow.
And then I hung up on him.
Wow. Hirschman was telling Eastman to lawyer up. How significant is that, you think?
Huge.
Wow.
Huge, because that just underlies the fact that any attempt to overturn an election, to derail our democracy by whatever means, is a criminal offense. Seditious conspiracy, whatever you want to call it. And that's the White House Deputy Counsel saying it.
And they knew
Real
it.
time.
Yeah.
Plus, I love the bat that says justice. I kind of dig that.
It is unbelievable to think when you hear that conversation, Margaret, that Eastman was still plotting it, trying to find ways to overturn the election after.
Oh, that was January 7th.
Yeah.
They just kept going.
Yeah.
Nothing stopped them.
He's a key player in all of this.
John Eastman is a seminal player in all of this. I mean, and by the way, John Eastman had clerked for Judge Luttig, Michael Luttig, who is going to be testifying on Thursday. He is the one who created the legal argument that Mike Pence hung his hat on for why Pence couldn't overturn the election. So you have actually an internecine feud of conservative legal intelligentsia. By the way, Luttig clerked for Scalia. And so it's just real rifts within the conservative. I mean, it shows you how corrupt the conservative movements really, cowing to Trump. Really, it had such a corrupting and corrosive effect on every level of the conservative movement.
Yeah, well, they just can't quit him. So listen, let me ask you, two people you know. Mm-hmm. Rudy Giuliani.
Yep.
Jason Miller.
Do you know him?
You worked.
I'm familiar with
You
his
worked for him, didn't you?
I did for 7 years, and was proud to do it when he was mayor.
He is pushing back on these claims by Jason Miller. And by the way, Jason Miller said this is under sworn. He was under oath, right? This is in sworn testimony, saying that Rudy Giuliani was drunk on election night and encouraging Donald Trump to claim victory. What do you think of that? Rudy Giuliani is pushing back against this. Help us make sense of this.
First, as you say, Jason Miller and Bill Stepien, by the way, both worked for Rudy Giuliani in his 2008 presidential campaign, where, by the way,
we met.
Okay, so they know.
Wait, you met in 2008 at the.
Yeah.
We met in 2006 because remember you had to run for president.
Because I've known you since then. I'm like, wait a minute. Go on.
But the key point is, first of all, they both have known Rudy for a long time, and they would be an excellent judge of whether or not he was intoxicated. I will say that, for all the time I worked for Rudy, he was not a big drinker. This is a great departure. Rudy's pushback allegedly today was he's a drinker of Diet Pepsi. That also is a lie, because he actually liked Diet Coke the entire time I knew him. But it's clear there's some self-medication problems going on, at least according to people who were witnesses who knew him over the course of his career. This isn't people scoring cheap shots against Rudy. These are people who liked and admired him enough to work for him at one time. And they're dividing themselves into Team Normal and Team Rudy, which is terrible.
I think it's hard for somebody who is as loyal as John Avlon was for so long to have to give such an honest and sort of unvarnished commentary on somebody.
So you don't know what it is, but you think there's something going on there?
Look, Rudy Giuliani, I knew, who I worked for, said, to be locked into partisan politics doesn't permit you to think clearly. He's not thinking clearly.
It was very eloquent.
There you go.
Very diplomatic of you. Thank you both.
Thanks, Tom.
Good seeing you. 2006, huh?
About that.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that. Thank you. The January 6th committee now set to hold its next hearing on Thursday. It will focus on the former Vice President Mike Pence, but he wasn't asked to testify. We're going to find out why when Congressman Adam Schiff, a member of the committee, joins me. There he is. He's next, right after the break. The January 6th committee releasing new video of Trump lawyer Eric Hirschman explaining how conservative attorney John Eastman was allegedly still trying to challenge the election results even after the insurrection. Now, in the clip, Hirschman asks Eastman if he is out of his effing mind. So joining me now, a member of the Select Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He's also the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Representative Schiff, we are so happy you're here. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
So John Eastman is the conservative lawyer who tried to pressure Pence to overturn the election. As you know, will you be able to prove that Trump was behind this campaign?
Well, I think we certainly are presenting evidence that the president was the architect of this whole plot to overturn the election with its different elements, elements that included, all the litigation, the big lie that drove it all, a pressure campaign on state and local officials, and as you'll see later this week, the pressure campaign on the vice president. He was obviously part and parcel of that, issuing his own tweets to pressure the vice president, going out to the mall to pressure the vice president. So the evidence, much of it already in the public eye, is powerful, and there's more that the public will see this week.
So Thursday's hearing, it was going to be a hearing on Wednesday, but now there's one on Thursday, and then there'll be others next week. We'll discuss that. But Thursday's hearing will focus on Mike Pence. Why didn't the committee ask Pence himself to testify, or is his chief of staff, Mark Short, who was the former vice president on January 6th?
I'm not at liberty to talk about which witnesses will be testifying, but, I can say that in some cases we've gotten the information we need from people in the room. It may not be the principals, but at the same time, we're not excluding the idea of bringing in some of the top people. So whether they testify this week or not doesn't exclude the possibility that we bring in other witnesses later.
All right. So other members of the Select Committee have been all over the place on whether you plan to make criminal referrals to the DOJ. You have said that you feel there's credible evidence of criminal activity committed by Trump. So why wouldn't you do something about that if you indeed believe that?
Well, as a committee, we may. I think the point is that we're going to conclude the hearings. We'll have a discussion about the evidence, whether to make a referral. If we do make a referral, what that referral will be. To be honest with you, I think there's been much ado about nothing in terms of disagreements within the committee. We really haven't had a chance to talk it through. So I wouldn't characterize it as disagreements. I would characterize it as we haven't had that discussion yet, but we will in its proper time. And then we'll decide whether to make referrals and what those referrals would look like if we do.
So you haven't discussed this in all your time about criminal referrals?
I think that individual members have talked to other members about it. But, we've had our focus primarily on doing the investigation. And then, of course, lately on presenting the evidence during the hearings. So we're taking it, one step after another. And I think it was premature before we, really had done much of the investigation, let alone concluded it, to be talking about what we would want to refer to the Justice Department. The exceptions, of course, are when people were in criminal contempt of Congress. There, it was patently obvious that we would refer them, and it was just a question of which ones to refer and when. But the broader question, we'll get to it at its appropriate time.
So then what is the end game here? If you prove Trump or his allies broke the law, but there is no criminal referral, what is the point of this whole investigation? Is it just about setting the record straight?
No, there are two different missions here. There's our mission and then there's the mission of the Justice Department. Our mission is not a criminal prosecution. We don't have that authority. Our mission is to expose the facts to the public light about a plot to overturn a presidential election, the first non-peaceful transfer of power we've had in our history, and prescribe remedies, legislative remedies, to protect our country going forward. That's our principal mission. The principal mission of the Justice Department is to bring people to justice who break the law. Now, we can make a referral, but of course, the Justice Department doesn't sit around waiting for referrals from us. At least they haven't in the past. I hope they're not simply waiting for us now. It's their duty to follow the evidence, and if there are credible allegations of crime, to pursue them against anyone, including former presidents. But our mission is quite different. That's not to say, again, that we won't make a referral. We may very well do so, but I would hate to give the public the impression that somehow that's necessary for the Justice Department to do its work, or they're waiting for us. They shouldn't be waiting, and if they are, I don't understand why they're departing from what the Justice Department generally does.
Okay, so then if you said if they shouldn't be waiting, do you find, at least in what you know, enough credible evidence for the Justice Department to act at this moment?
I certainly believe there's enough evidence for them to open investigations of several people. And so does Judge David Carter in California, who believes that the former president and others were engaged in likely multiple criminal acts. And so if the Justice Department concurs with Judge Carter, let alone my own view, or others, they should be pursuing that. And so, yes, I think there is sufficient evidence to open an investigation. And, it would be up to the Justice Department ultimately to decide, does that evidence rise to proof beyond a reasonable doubt such that they're comfortable indicting someone? But there's certainly, in my view, enough evidence to open investigations.
As the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, I've got to get your take on President Biden's trip to Saudi Arabia in July after promising to turn the country into the pariah of the Middle East. We're also told that he's going to meet with the man intelligence officials say is responsible for the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Is this a mistake?
I think it is. I wouldn't go. I wouldn't shake his hand. I want nothing to do with him. And I understand, the president has to deal with a whole variety of difficult issues, but I wouldn't go. This is someone who, was involved in the premeditated murder and dismemberment of a U.S. resident, a journalist, who has a terrible human rights record. And it just goes to show you how, the need for fossil fuels so distorts our foreign policy and causes us to act in ways not consistent with our values. And, it's yet another argument on top of, the fact that we're destroying the planet for weaning ourselves off of foreign oil, but off of fossil fuels altogether.
Representative Schiff, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Prices are high. Are they about to get higher? I'm going to ask the former Treasury Secretary who predicted inflation would be a problem while everyone else said it would just be a blip. That's next. Look, it's the news. We didn't say it was a good news. It's the news, okay, that we report every day. Stocks taking another tumble today as President Joe Biden acknowledged during a speech in Philadelphia that inflation is sapping the strength of a lot of families. And he reiterated that inflation continues to be his administration's biggest focus. Watch.
The problem is Republicans in Congress are doing everything they can to stop my plans to bring down costs on ordinary families. That's why my plan is not finished and why the results aren't finished either. Jobs are back, but prices are still too high. COVID is down, but gas prices are up. Our work isn't done.
So he says he's got a plan to bring down the cost of gas and food, but it is going to take some time. How much time? Join me now, the former Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers. Larry, thank you for joining. I appreciate it. And I have to say that, Larry, you predicted this, and there were a lot of folks who were doubting you, but you were right about this one.
Yep, I wish I had not been, Don, and I hope that the president will prove correct and we'll see inflation come down as rapidly as possible. I'm glad that the Fed appears to be stepping up to act very strongly with respect to inflation risks. I think that is a step in the right direction. I think if we can pass a meaningful bill that raises taxes to reduce excess demand, that reduces pharmaceutical prices, that can contribute to a further reduction in inflation. I think if we can reduce tariffs where those tariffs aren't strategic and are hurting us but not doing much to the Chinese, I think that can make a meaningful contribution to reducing inflation. But I think it's going to take time to put out this fire, and it's going to burn for a while, and it's not going to be completely comfortable while we are putting out the fire. That's just a consequence of the situation we find ourselves in.
Let me just give us people a snapshot of the moment that we're in right now. There's record high inflation, gas prices averaging $5 a gallon. The stock market is tumbling into a bear market. Consumer goods are rising at the fastest pace in 4 decades. That is really the reality. But you said there are things that we can do, Larry, and you said including legislation, and there are things that the president can actually do as well. But it's going to take some time. Listen, when I had you here in late April, we talked about this when you were predicting this. And we talked about how long it possibly lasts. You said it's going to be inflation. It's going to be a while. How long are we going to be with inflation? This high?
Oh, I'd be very surprised if we didn't still have inflation at a meaningful rate a year from now. It may well come down. I think it's probably likely to come down from the 8+% range that it's been at. But we're still going to have inflation for quite some time to come, and we're probably going to have a slowing economy as well. So there's going to be an element of what people call stagflation in our situation. But look, Don, what we need to do as a country is not shed tears over where we are. We need to roll up our sleeves and address the problems. And that means doing things to control demand, to make life more affordable for families, by reducing pharmaceutical prices, by doing everything we can to increase energy supplies, by doing what we can with respect to maintaining a flow of goods into the country, by getting rid of non-strategic tariffs so we can bring down prices. And we need to be patient, and we need to look beyond the near-term economic distress to build the greatest economy that there's ever been.
Yeah.
By strengthening our infrastructure, by taking account of the remarkable technological progress that there has been. We can do things. It's not going to be easy, but you know, Don, I spend a lot of time traveling and talking to economists from people in other parts of the world, and I'd rather have our challenges than the challenges facing Europe or Japan. And I'd rather have almost anybody's challenges than the challenges that are facing China right now with what's happening with the COVID lockdowns, with all the financial problems, with the average woman having only one child, with everything they're dealing with in terms of real estate.
I understand.
So
Listen,
I think we need to look forward.
I think people agree with you with that. But the question is, you know, for most people, and you can certainly understand that, it's the immediate moment when it's a challenge to buy gas to get to work, when it's a challenge to get baby formula. That is all happening in the moment right now. And I must ask you about a recession. Go on, please.
Yeah, look, you're right. And gasoline is mostly about President Putin's naked aggression. And if we want to not have these kinds of problems again, we're going to have to stand up firmly to that naked aggression.
But do you see a
I think
recession
one of
in
the
our
more
future?
encouraging things that's happened is the way the NATO alliance has stood together. I think we are likely to have a recession. I think we have overheated the economy and gotten some bad luck. And when the pendulum swings too far one way, it tends to swing back the other way. So I think we are likely to have a recession sometime in the next 2 years. And we're just going to need to work through that recession if it comes. If we try to avoid it and we try to not do it, that I think is the very real risk that we will turn an episode of inflation into an era of inflation.
Okay, let me ask you.
And that would be a very costly error. I
got to ask you this before I have to go, because I have a lot to get to here. The stocks are down again today. We're bracing for a Fed rate hike. That could be the biggest since 1994. That will certainly impact Americans and mortgage rates and car loans and credit cards and whether people can buy homes and so forth. Will that help with inflation? What do you think of that? And how long are we going to be in this period where we have these high interest rates where people, because most of Americans' wealth is in their homes. So how long are you expect this?
Don, I think we're going to be raising interest rates for quite some time to come. I think we've got to remember that while we've been through a period of remarkably low
quite some time,
rates,
meaning for how long do you think?
The level of interest rates that we're now talking about is not something that's really terribly atypical in the context of the last generation. My guess is we're going to have mortgage rates perhaps in the 5% range for several years from now. But I think that is something that people will be able to manage, and it may be that it will contribute to some movement downwards in a red-hot housing market that's fine for people like me who own homes, but is a big challenge for people who are looking to buy their first homes.
Yeah. Well, listen, at least you have a positive perspective about it, glass half full, as you're delivering this news. Larry Summers, we appreciate having you. Come back, please. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're watching election results closely tonight. John King is at the Magic Wall for us, and he's going to have an update right after this. As promised, an update now on today's key primary election races. Back with us at the Magic Wall, Mr. John King. John, hello again. You're watching the numbers come in. What's the latest?
And I'm watching something, Don, that seems eerily familiar. Nevada, the polls closed 10 o'clock in the east. I'm going to pull up the Senate primary. There's a list of candidates. What do you notice about this map? Still no votes. No votes. I could show you the governor's primary, still no votes. In the 2020 presidential election, remember, election night was Tuesday, just like this primary night. It was Friday. Before we called Nevada in 2020. Let's hope it doesn't take that long to count the votes this time. But these are key primaries. This is the Senate primary. Donald Trump endorsed Adam Laxalt. He's a big lie proponent, trying to win the Senate nomination in a seat Republicans think they can pick up in the fall. And that Senate race in Nevada, Don, could be one of those 2 or 3 that decide which party controls the Senate come January. But nothing yet in Nevada in any of those races. Republicans also think they can pick up a couple House seats there. So let's move over to South Carolina, which is where we've been watching all night. Two Trump grudge matches on the ballot in South Carolina. One of them is right here in the 7th district. Russell Fry is Trump's candidate. Why? Because the incumbent Tom Rice voted to impeach Donald Trump. Tom Rice says he's proud of that vote, says he stands by that vote, and he's prepared to be retired if necessary. Well, we're not there yet. We're still counting votes. But not only is Russell Fry way ahead, 51% to 25% round up, the 51 is important. You got to be above 50, Don, 50 plus 1 to avoid a runoff in the state of South Carolina. That's the 7th district. Now let's move down to the 1st district. Nancy Mace, again, this is a much closer race. She is the incumbent. Donald Trump wants her defeated as well. He endorsed Katie Arrington because Nancy Mace, early on especially, said some harsh things about Donald Trump on January 6th. She's at 53%. 45%, sorry, I just moved over to the next district by accident there. I'll come back to it here. 53-45 with about 77%, and so still counting. But again, Nancy Mace above 50. That would mean she's the candidate if she holds that lead, Don.
All right, John King, thank you. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you. A gunman in Texas shooting at a summer camp filled with 250 children and staff. A man trying to forcibly get into an elementary school in Alabama. Both stopped by quick action from law enforcement. Those stories are next. He's in. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell indicating today he's a yes vote on the bipartisan gun package senators have been negotiating for weeks now. If the bill lines up with the framework announced on Sunday. It's something Americans have been demanding since a gunman opened fire in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, killing 19 children and 2 teachers. And unfortunately, there have been more incidents of gunmen targeting children since that massacre. But thankfully, those incidents were stopped by police officers who acted quickly. CNN's Josh Campbell has a story now.
Parents in Texas just grateful to hold their children after police rushed to a North Texas sports field house where a summer camp was being held and shot a gunman threatening the camp. Police in Duncanville, Texas, near Dallas, said they exchanged gunfire with the man who opened fire at the camp on Monday, where some 250 children aged 4 to 14 and staff were present, some hiding.
He had texted me and said, "Mom, I think someone's entered the field house with a gun."
When the gunman entered the building, police say camp counselors began moving the children to a safe area and locking doors.
He went in the room, and then we heard shooting, and then we got scared, and everybody started crying. They just told us to stay quiet, and we were in the men's room, so there were showers in there, so we hid in the showers.
I was praying to God just so nothing will happen.
Police shot and killed the gunman. No children, staff, or officers were hurt, according to officials.
Upon hearing that gunshot, they did what they were trained to do, the counselors. They moved the kids to a safe area and began locking the doors. The suspect went to a classroom, was unable to get inside, and did fire 1 round inside the classroom where there were children inside.
There was no hesitation whatsoever. As we're very thankful for their training, that they do exactly what they're trained to do.
In Alabama, just last week, a man was shot and killed by a school resource officer after police say he attempted to enter an elementary school where 34 children were attending a summer literacy camp. Law enforcement said he was also trying to forcibly enter a patrol vehicle and was killed after an altercation with the officer at the school.
He went straight to the threat, he confronted it, and he dealt with it, and it ended in, unfortunately, the death of the suspect, but that's the safest alternative, to keep that threat out of that school.
And Don, it's been 3 weeks since that deadly shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and there's still several questions that law enforcement hasn't answered about their response on that day, particularly these reports that they were treating the situation as a barricaded subject rather than an active shooter. Compare that with these two examples we just brought you from Alabama and the Dallas area. Those are how law enforcement is supposed to respond, to go towards the sound of gunfire to try to stop a threat. Of course, it's also worth pointing out that in the case of the Dallas suburb camp incident, it's not just police who are being applauded for their response, but authorities also praising the camp counselors for quickly springing into action, trying to get those kids to safety as the shots rang out. Don?
Josh Campbell, thank you very much. Primary election results are coming in. John King is back at the Magic Wall, and he's got the latest numbers right after this. It is primary election night in America. Polls just closing in Nevada. We're also getting results in from South Carolina, where Trump's election lie is front and center in key races one day after a dramatic day of testimony on Capitol Hill. And the January 6th committee is out tonight, promising much more to come. We're going to tell you about that in just a moment. But first, we're going to get the primary results. In is John King at the Magic Wall, and Kyung Law is in North Las Vegas for us. They both join us now. Kyung, good evening to you. You're at a tabulation center where all the votes are coming in, I should say. We have been waiting for some results now. Are you seeing any? What are you seeing there?
What we're seeing, and I'm going to have my cameraman, Bo Malloy, just take a quick look over my shoulder. You see these carts and the boxes that are on top of them. These are actually cartridges that are coming in from the various polling centers, the vote centers, and then they will go to the people sitting at these various long tables where they will be, all that data will be uploaded and then sent to the elections board over in Clark County, and then that will be tabulated, and then we're going to start seeing the results. So these are the very, very first, just in the last 60 seconds or so, Don, that are starting to come in. We are specifically looking at what is going to be happening in the GOP primary for the U.S. Senate. It is essentially a two-man race. One of the candidates is the former Attorney General, Adam Laxalt. He is someone who many of the voters we spoke with today at various polling centers said that they consider the front runner. He's the more established candidate. He has been in office. He is a better known quantity, and he has Donald Trump's endorsement. But he has seen a late challenge from a political newcomer, Sam Brown. And he's someone, an Army retired captain, someone who earned the Purple Heart while he was in Afghanistan when he was injured, who has seen some grassroots energy, a lot of support, able to buy ad time. And so a lot of sort of the grassroots Republicans say that they support him. So we're going to see how that race shapes up because, Don, what it is going to do, it is really going to set the stage for what happens in November, who the Republican will be in challenging the Democratic incumbent, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, who is defending a seat in a state where Joe Biden won by just about 2 percentage points. So really going to be a nail biter today, a lot of Republicans believe, but we'll just have to see as these votes start being counted on.
And John King, you are following key races out of South Carolina. Incumbents Representative Nancy Mace and Tom Rice, Representative Tom Rice. Rice is one of the rare Republicans to impeach Trump after the insurrection. What's the latest there?
So let's move across the country, Don, and look at the House primaries. You pull up South Carolina. Votes coming in a little bit more quickly than Kyung's experience in Nevada, but we're several hours in now, and you see this is very interesting here. The 7th District, Russell Fry is Donald Trump's candidate here. He's a conservative running against the incumbent. Tom Rice has had that seat since 2012. He won big in the Tea Party year of 2012. He's getting 25% of the vote right now. That is disappointing for a Republican incumbent who's represented the district for a decade. 99% of the vote in. We're still counting the final votes, Don, because that 51 is important. You have 50% plus one, you avoid a runoff, and Russell Fry would be the Republican nominee in a very Republican district. So it looks at this moment like Tom Rice will be defeated. He voted, as you said, to impeach Donald Trump, and Republican voters appear ready to punish him. We'll get to the final math. And the other grudge match for Trump is down here in South Carolina's 1st District. This is Charleston, and then further south along the coast. Nancy Mace is the incumbent that Trump wanted to lose here. Trump endorsed Katie Arrington at the moment with about 78% of the vote counted. This is a closer race, 53 to 45, but significantly at the moment, Nancy Mace Don is still above 50. I just want to note, if we look at the district this way, let me just move it up this way and look at the district from this perspective. This is by county in the district. Katie Arrington's base is down here, so I just want to check. Only 50% of the vote counted down here, so if you're in the Arrington campaign or the Mace campaign, you're looking to see, this is where Katie Arrington runs strongest, and so you're looking to see, can she make up the ground? But if you look overall, again, we're getting close to 80%. Nancy Mace has a nearly 5,000 vote lead. We'll count to the end.
All right. Oh, John, let me ask you, there's a Texas tonight. There's a special election there. What can you tell us about that?
This is an interesting one as well, because this is a Democratic seat. The Democratic incumbent resigned, so they're having this special election. Let me bring it up for you on the map. Because it's a special election, it's a little funky to get to the programming, but let's pop down here to the end and bring up the state of Texas and move it over. This House general election. Number one, you see this strangely drawn district. We could have a week-long conversation about Texas gerrymandering if you'd like, but it's the 34th district. It was represented by a Democrat, and look right here, 97%. We're still counting, but the Republican candidate, Mayra Flores, was at 51%. Wall's acting up a little bit tonight, Don. I'll bring that back. Is at 51%. If she can hold that and stay above 51%, she will be the Congresswoman only through January. This race will be rerun in November. This is to fill the remainder of the term. But Democrats have a very narrow majority in the House. If she were to win this seat, Mayra Flores, I believe that would make it 220 to 210 with 5 vacancies. And so for the next couple of months, it would impact the margins in the House. But we'll watch till we're completely done. But if she stays above 51%, she'll be the Congresswoman for the rest of the year.
All right. John King, Young Law, thank you very much. I want to bring in now CNN senior political analysts Kirsten Powers and political commentators Bakari Sellers and Scott Jennings. Hello, one and all. Good evening. Bakari, you were supposed to be here. What happened? Anyway, we'll get to that. I thought you were going to be sitting on the set with me. I was all excited about it, and there you are in your home studio. I don't like it. I don't like it. This is your home state, though. What is your reaction to how South Carolina, this primary, is playing out?
Well, I mean, I think it's what most people thought at the beginning of the day. You had two candidates, both who opposed Donald Trump at different times. But candidates actually matter. Russell Fry was a great candidate, and he pulled off a defeat of Tom Rice. And Katie Arrington simply is not a good candidate.
Hey, Bakari, I don't want you
Yes.
to speak out of turn. We have a result in South Carolina. We want to get back to John King, and then we'll continue our discussion. Mr. King, what do you have for us, sir?
It's just the exclamation point. You can look at on the map now to what Bakari was just talking about, and that is in the first head-to-head primary matchup. We have other people who voted for Donald Trump, Republicans who voted for Donald Trump who decided not to run. But in the first head-to-head Republican primary matchup, somebody who voted to impeach Donald Trump, that would be Tom Rice. He has lost to Russell Fry. We are now projecting this race. He's above 51%. Therefore, Russell Fry will be the nominee. This is the 7th district in South Carolina. Bakari knows the neighborhood well. It's Myrtle Beach, and then it stretches out into this much more rural, much more conservative area here. I'll just show you quickly, Don, how it breaks down by county to bring it up if you look at it this way. And that tells you the sweep of the victory. Russell Fry not only won the primary tonight, he won, he led, carried every county in the district. So this is a victory for Russell Fry. This is a victory for Donald Trump. It looks like it'll be a split decision if Nancy Mace holds on. But for the congressman who voted yes on impeachment, who said he was proud of that vote, Donald Trump's going to say, gotcha.
John King, thank you very much. We appreciate it. That's why we have John King there. Let's go back to the folks who are discussing. Bakari, you want to pick it up from here?
No, I mean, I think that what John King said was right. But one of the things I wanted to point out is in these races where Donald Trump is endorsing, the quality of candidate matters. And in South Carolina, you saw a dichotomy there, but also the districts matter. You know Charleston very well, Don, and Charleston is turning. It's a purplish, bluish type of district surrounded by Beaufort and Dorchester and Berkeley, et cetera. That's where Nancy Mace is running. It's not nearly as conservative as where Tom Rice got defeated by Russell Fry tonight. And so those two things actually matter. And, you know, Donald Trump's going to claim victory tonight, but he was still 50% today.
Yeah. Are you surprised by this, Scott?
No, Rice actually cast two weird votes. You know, he voted, I believe, to reject the electoral vote counting. So he initially sided with Trump on rejecting the Electoral College in at least a couple of states. Then he turned around and voted to impeach Trump. So if you could get on the wrong side of virtually everybody within about a 5-minute period, he figured out how to do it. You know, Mace's transgressions were more rhetorical, and she ran a pretty good race. So I'm glad Mace survived, and And I agree with Bakari. I think candidate quality there also played a big role. I completely concur. So good job for Nancy Mace, and glad she'll likely be going back to Congress.
Do you care to comment on this, Kirsten? It's not your home state.
No, I mean,
You're not a Republican.
It's not my home state, I know. But I do actually, I agree with what Scott just said in terms of, Mace is in basically a swing district. So it's a very different district, and they're very different kinds of votes. Voting to certify the election, I think, is possibly something that can be overlooked in a way that impeaching Donald Trump can't be overlooked, and obviously made Rice a real target for voting to impeach.
Kirsten, let me ask you about
Hey,
this.
Don, before we...
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. But I was going to say, before we move on from the primaries, I wanted to pick up on the Texas race. I know we haven't talked about it much, but this Texas 34, the district is run under the old lines. So Biden won this by 4. Republicans going to win it tonight. And then in the fall, I think it's been redrawing into like a Democrat plus 15. So it'll probably go Democrat in the fall. However, 84% Hispanic population in that district. Hillary Clinton won this district huge. Barack Obama won this district huge. Biden, it was a narrow victory for him. You can see in terms of like larger macro political issues right now going on in this country, to me tonight, Texas 34, the movement of Hispanic voters towards the Republican Party in that part of Texas, to me is one of the biggest stories of the night. I know it's not quite final yet, but it's a big deal.
What do you make of that? Do you see a trouncing, Kirsten? I think Scott is indicating that there's going to be a trouncing of Democrats come midterms. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that is sort of the expectation. And I think if we look at it even historically, this was we were all predicting quite some time ago, even before Joe Biden's approval ratings got to the point that they are, that Democrats are going to have a hard time, because historically that's what happens to the president's party in the first midterm election. I think that a lot of things now have come together to make it even tougher terrain for Democrats because of what is happening with inflation. You have a CNN poll showing that that is the #1 issue with voters, and they prefer Republicans by 20 points on that issue. And it's an issue that unfortunately Joe Biden doesn't have a lot of control over. And so, gas prices are high, and that's very tightly connected to the approval rating of the president. So yes, I think the expectation is that Democrats are, not going to have a great midterm election.
Mm-hmm. Let's turn now to January 6th, before we were so, not really rudely interrupted, but Scott, took us down another path here. January 6th Select Committee has been presenting videos of multiple Trump insiders saying that everyone knew Trump's election lie was bogus. I just wonder, will the committee's work have any impact on these races, Bakari?
That's a good question. I think that Kristen just said it best. I mean, when you think about inflation, when you think about gas prices, and the issue she didn't mention, which is also very high on voters' minds. In fact, we just saw Val Deming's introductory ad talk about it and tackle that issue as crime and the rise of violent crime. And so I think those issues, while January 6th is going on, it's going to be kind of difficult for it to cut through. But what you have seen is something that I did not think was quite possible, which is this committee has put on not just thrilling TV to watch it, but they've utilized the words of Republicans. This isn't a one-sided idea at all. This isn't a one-sided committee with one-sided testimony. When you look at the spat today between the Diet Pepsi drinking Rudy Giuliani versus Jason Miller and others, you see that this is actually the inner workings of the Republican Party. Will it be a major issue? Yes, but I think it will be a major issue along with 3 or 4 other major issues.
Mm-hmm. The January 6th committee putting out a video tonight previewing what's to come. Let's take a look.
He started to ask me about something dealing with Georgia and preserving something potentially for appeal. And I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, I only want to hear 2 words coming out of your mouth from now on: orderly transition. And I screamed, I said, I don't want to hear any other effing words coming out of your mouth, no matter what, other than orderly transition. Repeat those words to me. And I screamed, and eventually he said, orderly transition. I said, good, John. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it. And then I hung up on him.
So that is Trump White House lawyer Eric Hirschman telling John Eastman to lawyer up, Scott. I mean, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, Donald Trump, at the end of his political life there, in this campaign anyway, had two kinds of people in his life. People who were telling him the truth and then, were sort of professional political people and seemingly, clear-eyed about this. And then he had people who were bat-poop crazy, and he chose poorly. And he drank from the wrong cup, and you see what happens here. And I mean, honestly, it's been quite obvious from this testimony that there were plenty of people saying, look, this is not what you think it is. You've lost. You shouldn't say. He had the correct advice, and he went venue shopping and found people who were telling him really, really bad things. And now a lot of these people are. I don't know if they're ever going to nab Trump, but some of these people that were feeding him this stuff are clearly in trouble. So, and you know what? They deserve it. They did a bad thing. So, I don't feel bad for him at all.
Kirsten, Bakari making the point that these are really, he said there were Republicans fighting against each other. This is really Trump's inner circle, the people who are closest to him, his closest and most trusted advisors who are actually providing all of the ammo and the testimony to the January 6th committee. I mean, this is this is his White House lawyer.
Right. And, I've been asked this before and about, will this affect the midterms? And my general feeling has been the same as Bakari's, which is probably not, maybe around the margins. And how crazy is that, right? Because of what you're saying is that this isn't a partisan witch hunt by any standard. This is something that is being, this is showcasing Republicans and people who worked for Donald Trump. So they obviously, something about Donald Trump they liked and felt they had to be there, who are telling these stories that are just unbelievable, right? You just can't believe that this is happening, that these conversations are occurring where a White House lawyer is having to tell somebody we're doing an orderly transition. That's just something that we take for granted. So I just think that it's been so baked into the cake for some reason that people have made up their minds. Now, I would love to be wrong about that. And if I'm wrong about that, I'll be very, very happy. But it does seem when it comes to these Trump issues that people kind of stake out their positions and it's very difficult to shake them from them.
I think you're right. Scott is in agreement as well. I think that most people probably, I think their positions are, they are stilled in their position. People believe what they believe at this point, right? And it's hard to break them away from it. But I just find this testimony so compelling that it has to make you at least think, even if you are not going to change your position, Bakari. Is that a fair assessment?
I think so. I think that you're highlighting the greater issue we have in politics today, that people are entrenched in their positions. Now, if you took 12 independents, who I'm not sure how many independents are watching this, and you showed them this, I do believe that this would move them and sway them. But just to highlight the depth and the seriousness of what we're talking about here, not just people in the president's inner circle, I'm hard pressed to figure out how Rudy Giuliani and others have not committed a crime. I guess that's for the DOJ to figure out later down the road. But you even talk about a president of the United States who raised $250 million for something he knew was a fraud, for something he knew was improper. He took advantage of individuals. And when you think about all of these things, not just, whether or not there are attempts to overthrow the government and the fraud and the deceit coming from the highest levels of government, this is something that you see only in movies that is really playing out in front of our eyes. But at the end of the day, like we go back to, the price of whiting is an extra $1 per pound. To fill up a gas tank is $5 on average a gallon. These are real issues. And so a lot of people are just not able to focus on issues of democracy, but focus on issues of a pocketbook.
I got to go, Scott. Sorry.
But
Can't
they don't
do it. I can't do it.
All right.
I'm getting yelled at.
Okay.
I got the last word.
It's interesting what people will ignore and
I'll call
overlook.
you,
Thank
Bakari. Bakari, I'll call you.
Yeah, and text me. I want to know what you have to say as well. Thank you. I appreciate it. The investigation into Trump's claim of voter fraud in Georgia heating up. Now authorities want to speak with a former publicist to Kanye West. Plus, Record flooding in Yellowstone National Park, collapsing homes and leaving families stranded. So Justin Sinan projects that South Carolina GOP Representative Nancy Mace will win her primary race against Trump-backed challenger Katie Arrington. Also, a new development in the Georgia investigation into the former president's baseless claims of voter fraud. Investigators with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office are now seeking testimony from a former publicist for R. Kelly and Kanye West, who allegedly pressured a local election worker to admit that Trump's lies about voter fraud in 2020 were true. That is according to court documents obtained by CNN. So joining me now, the Republican Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan. Governor, good evening. Never a dull moment, never a dull moment. This is just one development, a complicated case, but it seems like Trump may be facing more trouble in Georgia than anywhere else he is being investigated. How do you see this?
Well, certainly the chaos continues to follow Donald Trump, and it should, right? The chaos and lies that he spread down here certainly didn't do us any justice. But it's part of the process, Don. I mean, moving on from Donald Trump is part of the process. Just like we're watching the January 6th hearings, not only are they talking about the awful events that led up to January 6th, but we're now really seeing a peek behind the curtain of all the advisors really talking truth to power during those moments, and he just completely ignored it. But it's part of the process, and I think it means we're going to get closer to getting a real leader in our Republican Party to take on a president that not only myself, but folks in the middle and even folks on the left see as unfit to take on the job.
You saw the new video of the Trump campaign attorney, Eric Hirschman, saying that he wanted to hear from John Eastman. All he wanted to hear were the words orderly transition, and yet Trump's election lies, they just keep going on. What do you think when you hear that?
Yeah, it's cringeworthy. When I first heard that tape, it reminded me of Brad Raffensperger's phone call from the former president, and for an hour plus of being barraged with crazy, ludicrous ideas. But look, like I said, I mean, I think more and more people are waking up every day on the Republican side of the aisle, realizing that it's time to move on. They've attached themselves to a bunch of conspiracy theories that have no merit, and we're going to get back to solving real problems and trying to figure out. I mean, Don, think about this. I mean, this is hard for me to believe. The most important job in the world probably is arguably the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. And the last two presidents we put in place, one has made himself unfit for service because he lied, and one is, quite honestly, unexplainably unfit for his job because he can't explain anything. I mean, this is the most important job in the world, and these are the two people we've picked to put in charge. We deserve better. How do you think the committee is doing so far? Yeah, I think they're doing pretty well, right? I'm always skeptical of a congressional committee, a very partisan committee trying to fact find. I think they've done their homework, and I feel like they're delivering it in a fair and balanced way. Certainly, I don't think they're going to get to some sort of, judicial head in that committee process. But certainly, it's been enlightening to hear kind of the see and hear behind the curtain. Do you wish they had spoken out sooner? Look, I don't know if you can rush this stuff. There's so many moving parts. I mean, you're talking about a former president. You're talking about members of Congress. You're talking about people willing to lie on record. I mean, it's just hard to believe. One of the things that's really caught my attention, and I've said this publicly the last few days, I think it just completely disqualifies anybody as a legitimate leader going forward if they didn't get the events of January 6th right at the moment and stayed consistent with the facts that it was just a big lie and it was an insurrection. If you don't get that right, you don't deserve the right to serve in elected office, in my opinion. Governor, thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us. Yeah, thank you, sir. So Georgia was a critical state in the 2020 election, and it likely will be in the 2022 midterms as well. Senator Raphael Warnock trying to keep his seat from GOP opponent Herschel Walker. Senator Warnock joins me next. Tonight's primary is giving a glimpse of what's sure to be an intense 2022 midterm election season. Among the races expected to be closely watched this fall, the Georgia Senate battle between the Democratic incumbent, Senator Raphael Warnock, and the GOP challenger, Herschel Walker. They're facing off for a critical seat that may not only decide which party controls the Senate, but potentially impact the outcome of a number of big issues, from voting rights to gun safety. Senator Raphael Warnock joins me now. He's the author of a brand new book. It's called A Way Out of No Way. Thank you very much for joining. I used to hear that every Sunday morning in church growing up.
I should probably get
That's
back
right.
more often than I do now. But thank you, Senator, for joining us. I appreciate it. Let's talk some politics. So Democrats can't afford to lose a single seat in the Senate. You were able to flip yours from red to blue, but now Republicans are hoping that they can take it back. You obviously think that you're a better choice for Georgians, obviously, than your opponent, Herschel Walker. But do you think that he is qualified to serve in the Senate if he does win?
Great to be with you, Don. And the great thing about a democracy is it's not up to either one of us. It's up to the people of Georgia. And I can tell you that the people of Georgia have a real choice in front of them about who's ready to represent them in the United States Senate. I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of the work that I've done to support ordinary, hardworking families. We passed the single largest tax cut for middle and working class families in American history. It's called the Expanded Child Tax Credit. We passed a bipartisan infrastructure bill, and now I'm focused on lowering costs for seniors who are having to choose between prescription drugs and groceries. And I'm trying to get the President of the United States to do a substantial cancellation of student debt. This is the honor of my life, and I look forward to the conversation.
I have to ask you about a follow-up on something that happened last night. My colleague Anderson Cooper asked you if you think that President Joe Biden should run for re-election in 2024. You didn't give him a direct answer. The White House has repeatedly said that he plans to run. Just, do you intend to support him? Can I get a straight answer on that?
Of course. Do I plan to support him? Of course. I support the work that I'm trying to do on behalf of the people of Georgia. I think that too often we're focused on the next election. I can tell you, as people gather around their kitchen tables, they're not thinking about these issues in terms of Democrats and Republicans. And I'm willing to stand on behalf of the people of Georgia.
Yeah. But I mean, they do think in terms of who they're voting for. They think in terms of Democrats and Republicans. I understand on the issues, people just want to be able to afford gas and put food on their table. But when it comes to an election, you know, you've got to be of a certain party in your state to vote at certain times of the year. So, again, I think you answered, but you do plan to support him in 2024.
I support the people of Georgia and their concerns. Listen, I have spent my whole life committed to service. I didn't even plan to go into politics. I'm not in love with politics. I'm in love with change. I'm in love with justice. And I'm focused every day on the concerns of ordinary, hardworking people.
I've got to ask you these questions about politics. So, and again, the current president. Recent polling shows that Joe Biden is losing support among black Americans. His job approval dropping from 87% to 67% within the span of a year. And that's among African Americans, among black Americans. If he is losing faith with black voters, does that bode well for his reelection chances and the people who he could help or hurt down ticket?
Don, I think that the problem in American politics right now is that even the conversation in a time as serious as this is too much about the politicians. It's about who's up and who's down, who's in and who's out. Meanwhile, ordinary, hardworking families are wondering who's looking out for them. And maybe it's because I've spent my life not in politics, but in the parish. I tend to think of this, you know, in the way that a shepherd does, in the way that a pastor does, which is why I'm trying to get an insulin bill passed right now, which would cap the cost of insulin, out-of-pocket cost, to $35 per person per month. And that's because I've stood with people as they've struggled with these issues, as they've had to go to dialysis, as they've dealt with an amputation. And my job is to represent the people who hired me to represent them. And that's the work I'm honored to do every single day. And it still blows my mind that that I'm able to do this work. After all, I was born a poor kid. I grew up in public housing, and somehow, in part through good federal public policy, and I talk about this in my book, A Way Out of Nowhere.
I was going to say, you have to give me a chance to talk about your book, so leave some time for that.
Yeah, through Pell Grants and low-interest student loans.
Well, let's talk
I was
about
able
that.
to make it through Morehouse College.
I want to put up a quote as we continue to talk about your book. You said, as I see it, the right to vote is a defining issue of our times, and this moment is a defining time in our history, a time when we must declare that our democracy belongs not to the politicians, but to the people. I mean, it coincides with what you're talking about right now. Through these January 6 hearings, we have gotten a glimpse of just how fragile our democracy is. Are you worried what could happen if the right to vote for, if Americans don't see, what could happen to the right to vote, I should say, if Americans don't see January 6 for what it was, and that was an attack on our democracy?
Well, I think all of us ought to stand up and pay attention because, some things are bigger than politics, and there's nothing more important than the democracy itself. And I think January 6th in many ways is an extreme expression of what happens when politicians become their own highest cause. And I think that temptation is in some ways inherent in the process because, after all, you do stand for re-election. But you ought to remember why you were elected in the first place and the work that you were called to do. And that's the work that I try to stay focused on every single day. I'm certainly deeply concerned about the implications of January 6th, but I'm inspired by the implications of January 5th. On January 5th, Georgia, a state that is a part of the former Confederacy, sent its first African-American senator, only the 11th in the history of our country, by the way, to the United States Senate, sent its first Jewish senator to the United States Senate, sent there by a multiracial coalition that's focused on the future of our country. And so in this moment, this American moment, this moral moment, we've got to decide if we're going to be the America of January 5th, which is bigger than party, that embraces all of us, where a kid who grew up in public housing can be a United States Senator, or are we going to be the America of January 6th? Are we going to give in to the forces of division and demagoguery? I choose January 5th. I choose democracy and freedom and justice. I choose what Dr. King called beloved community.
Well, you are focused on the people, and you're very focused on your message. And a lot of folks who come and do interviews should learn from you. The book is called Making a Way Out of No Way, a memoir of truth, transformation, and the new American story by Senator Raphael Warnock. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on. Please come back anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. A legislative standoff coming to an end. Family members of Supreme Court justices now set to get increased security protections a week after a threat against Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The House passing a bill today extending security protections to the immediate family members of Supreme Court justices. It comes just 1 week after a threat to Justice Brett Kavanaugh's life. CNN's Whitney Wild has the story.
The protests that have been taking place outside the justice's home these past months are unacceptable.
There are threats to justices across the board.
Tonight, the Supreme Court security protection debate ends after lawmakers approved a bill to help boost police presence at the homes of Supreme Court justices.
Why did it take so long? 6 weeks ago was when the draft leak happened, and the protests started at justices' homes almost immediately.
The proposed bill expands the authority of the Supreme Court police to protect, quote, any member of the immediate family of the Chief Justice, any associate justice, or any officer of the Supreme Court if the marshal determines such protection is necessary. Action on the bill had been delayed because Democrats wanted to expand it to specifically include protection for staff and clerks.
This bill has to do with the families of Supreme Court justices. I support protecting them. I also support protecting the employees and their families of the Supreme Court.
The more narrow measure took on new urgency in recent days after police say a man admitted he flew from California to Maryland, intending to kill Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh and then himself to give his life purpose. Department of Homeland Security officials are warning about a tense threat environment as the Supreme Court inches closer to potentially seismic opinions on guns and abortion.
We're seeing threats from all parts of the political spectrum.
protesters on both sides of the abortion debate have descended on the Supreme Court. Protesters have also gathered at the homes of conservative justices over the last several weeks, prompting some to point to this law from 1950.
I wrote to Attorney General Garland a month ago asking why he wasn't enforcing the laws on the books already against judicial intimidation.
That law designed to ban protesting outside the homes of judges, witnesses, and jurors to try to influence the court system.
The purpose of that statute appears to be to keep judges from being influenced by public opinion, and in particular, public opinion of people, possibly a mob of people outside their homes.
Meanwhile, Don, we are learning new details about the man police say targeted Kavanaugh. The Montgomery County Police Chief tells CNN that when that man, Nicholas Roski, saw the U.S. Marshals posted outside Kavanaugh's home, he turned around to contemplate his next move. That is when he texted his sister, who convinced him to call 911. And Don, that's exactly what he did.
Whitney Wild, thank you. Evacuations in Yellowstone National Park as unprecedented flooding rips homes off their foundations. Someone who witnessed the damage firsthand joins me next. Massive floodwaters pummeling Yellowstone National Park and nearby communities, washing out roads and bridges and cutting off electricity. Visitors forced to evacuate as the park closed all entrances, citing record flooding events. Check this out. This is in Gardner, Montana. A house collapsing into floodwaters of the Yellowstone River. First, the decks fall in. There it is. Then the entire house just floats away. And this is drone footage taken by Beartooth Slingshot Rentals on Monday morning, showing flooding and damage in Red Lodge, Montana. It's all because of heavy rainfall combined with runoff from melting snow. Roads in and out of Yellowstone will be closed through tomorrow. And officials say the town of Gardner has been left isolated, surrounded by water. That's where Elizabeth Alec lives, and she joins me now. Elizabeth, hi. I mean, it looks beautiful, but my goodness, I appreciate you joining us. How are you doing? Your friends and neighbors as well.
Yeah, we're doing okay. Actually, the road just opened to the north a few hours ago, so that's good. So the tourists were able to leave. They're letting people leave. They're not letting people enter at this time. So we're now open, so that's good. We have access to get up to Livingston, to stores and hospitals and things, and what we need. And there were hundreds of thousands, maybe even, of tourists stranded in town that had nowhere to go, that had been evacuated from the park and were just milling about. You know, they came here on vacation not to hang out in this tiny little town of Gardner, but to go into the park. So that was a bit much for the town to handle, but most of them were able to evacuate today, this afternoon. So that was good.
Well, it doesn't look like, obviously the complete danger is behind you, because the Yellowstone superintendent is warning tonight that there will be another high water event in the upcoming days. What have you been hearing from officials in your town? Are they preparing?
They are preparing, but I haven't heard that we need to be that concerned again. We haven't received any sort of evacuation order. And the river, it's at least, I want to say 5 feet lower than it was yesterday at this time. So we're not too worried right now. We haven't gotten as much rain as we had in the previous days. It rained straight 3-4 days in a row. And it was really the rain within Yellowstone and in the mountains that came down the river. The Yellowstone River runs south to north. So it actually starts in the Yellowstone Lake, and then it goes north to here. So this is all coming from the mountains and the lake in Yellowstone, and then it flows north to Livingston.
Yeah. So you're in your backyard, right?
In my backyard, yeah.
You can see the Yellowstone River, obviously, from your backyard, because we're looking at it now. And I understand that you have seen debris from other homes floating down the river. Do you think that your house is stable under these conditions?
Yes, I believe it is. We are just barely far enough away that we didn't get water at the house level, another 6 to 12 inches than we would have, and that would have been dangerous. But we were very, very lucky. It was close. So we're doing okay here. Yeah, it's been scary. At the time last night, there were houses floating by right here.
Crazy.
Doors and windows.
Yeah, we're looking at some of the video that you took of the debris. You sent us some pictures also from the only grocery store in town today, and you said that they were rationing off items like ground beef, which are now completely sold out. How concerned are you about getting food right now?
Now that the road to Livingston is open, we're pretty confident that we will get shipments of food in tomorrow. Today it was a little scary though, because this morning no one knew. No one knew if they were going to be able to leave town or how we would get anything in. We thought everything would have to be airlifted in. So yeah, everything was wiped out at the grocery store, and it was a little bit scary because we don't have any place else to go. So now that that one road is open, it was completely covered in water yesterday, but that's open now, and so we're okay. The road to Mammoth going south into the park, we've heard, is going to be closed until next year.
Wow.
So that would get out to a year, the north entrance to Yellowstone.
Well, we're glad you're okay. We appreciate you joining us. You stay safe, okay, Elizabeth?
Thanks. Take care, Don.
Take care. And thank you for watching, everyone. Our coverage continues.